and detection of fraud is a joint responsibility between the auditor, management, and council. As a result of the audit, we have no concerns in this matter. On page 4, you'll find the audit findings. We're required to have a discussion about significant accounting policies, estimates, and financial statement disclosures. Significant accounting policies are disclosed in the financial statements. Significant financial statement disclosures include the accumulated surplus note. So there's a breakdown of the accumulated surplus in note 9, and this is where you find the amounts invested in capital assets, unfunded liabilities, surpluses, and reserve funds. The municipality had a current year surplus of $295,443. Contingencies and litigation procedures are highlighted in note 20, and commitments are disclosed in note 18. Significant estimates on page 5 are involved in your solid waste landfill closure liabilities and your post-employment benefits liability, which is also determined with the use of an actuary. There's also estimates used in taxation revenue accruals, and also in the determination of whether there are any contaminated sites. Management has done an assessment, and they're not aware of any contaminated sites that needed liability to be accrued. Lastly, on page 6, as noted earlier, we did not become aware of any significant weaknesses in the design or the implementation of internal controls. So that concludes the required written communication. Are there any questions before we actually look at the financial statements and the actual numbers? Okay. Seeing none, if we can turn to the draft financial statements. And we're going to start with the audit report on the financial statements. They're in the appendix T. So if you keep going paging down. No, this is the same report. You don't have to switch reports, just page down. So these are the draft, and we're going to start there with the auditor's report. So management has prepared the financial statements from their internal records using the municipality's own software. The auditor's responsibility is to provide an opinion on these financial statements on whether they are in accordance with accounting standards. There is a new format to the financial statement. It is much longer than it has been in the past. The change in the format is a result of changes in the accounting standards, so nothing that is specific to Meaford, so there are no concerns with Meaford. You'll find this change in format for profit organizations, nonprofit organizations, public sector entities, so all entities have the same type of audit report. It is a clean audit report, so there were no issues that arose as a result of our audit. The audit is the highest level of assurance that we can provide. In the middle of the page is our opinions. So these financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. That is the main change to the format of the financial statement. So the opinion paragraph is now first in the format. The responsibilities of management and those charged with governance are defined in the lower half of that first page. Again, it's just there's been no changes to the responsibilities. They just have been defined more in the audit report as opposed to last year they were defined in the engagement letter. So, and again, that's a standard for all entities. And then the second part of the auditor's report is the auditor's responsibility. So again, just a little bit more lengthy, but no issues. On page 3, you'll find the statement of financial position, which is often called the balance sheet. So this is at a point in time on December 31st, 2018. As of December 31st, 2018, the financial assets totaled $17.5 million, and that's mostly made up of cash and investments. So The cash, there are three different line items in the financial assets: the cash, temporary investments, and the long-term investments. So they totaled 14 million. That's an increase of $1.7 million. The temporary investments are all in secured GICs and term deposits. The long-term investments are one funds, and those one funds are equity funds that were cashed out subsequent to the year end. The remainder of the assets are very similar to the prior year. Liabilities total at December 31st totaled just over $16 million. The largest amount in the liabilities is the deferred revenue. The deferred revenue was $4.7 million, and that's made up of your development charge funds, your gas tax funds, your MTO transit funding. So these are grants that you've received that you haven't spent the money for. So they show as a liability until you spend the money, and then they will go to revenue. So those funds won't actually be paid out in cash, even though they are in the liability section. The long-term liabilities, $579,000 was repaid during the year for your external debt. So that brings us down to net financial assets of $1.5 million. The net financial assets is an important financial statement indicator. A positive amount means that you do have financial resources for the future. So you have, even though you have a small amount of external debt, your overall financial statement is in a positive position. And if you kind of think about it the way, in a personal way, it's kind of like having a mortgage on your house. So you have a little bit of external debt, but hopefully you've got some reserve, some RSPs and some other investments that your total financial situation would be positive. The tangible capital assets were $78 million, so that's all the infrastructure, the land, the buildings, the roads, the sewers, the waters. Again, it should be noted that those are at cost, cost less amortization. So the amortization reflects the use of those assets over time, and the amortization shows as an expense on your income statement. The accumulated surplus, that's the equity the municipality has built up over time, both monetary and physical assets. On page 4, we find the transactions for the year, so the statement of operations. The revenues for the year totaled $24.5 million. So the revenues include all of your external revenues, so both for operating and capital purposes, but it does not include any transfers from your reserves. The expenses of $19.9 million includes all your operating expenses and amortization, but it does not include your actual capital purchases or the transfers to reserve. And this is in accordance with public sector accounting standards, so this differs from what you are seeing for your internal records, where you're budgeting on a cash basis, which is allowed under the legislation. So when you look at the budgeted amounts of 17 million compared to your actual results of 19.9, it's not because you've overspent, it's because the budget amounts do not include the amortization, where the actual amounts do include the amortization. If you take the amortization out, you'd only have $16 million in expenses. So in the blue year-end report, we do compare that without the amortization, so it's a little bit easier to see. That brings us down to the annual surplus. So again, it's important to note that this annual surplus of $4.6 million, that is not your operating surplus. That's not an operating amount that you can carry forward. That annual surplus is to represent your long-term planning. So the annual surplus focus on whether you've been raising funds on an annual basis to prepare for the replacement of your capital assets. So when you're budgeting You're budgeting to transfer money to reserves. You're planning on making capital purchases, and those aren't yet included in your expenses. So from the $4.6 million in your annual surplus, then you have to pay for your capital assets, you have to pay for your debt payments, and you have to pay for, you just need to set aside money in the reserves. So you want that annual surplus number to always be a positive number, and you always want that annual surplus number to be a fairly significant positive number, because the amortization amount that's included in your actual amount isn't going to be enough to cover your replacement of your capital assets. So again, if you think about if you bought a vehicle for $50,000 and you wanted to save over 5 years to replace that asset, you'd have $5,000 a year that you're expensing. But when you get 5 years down the road, that vehicle is now going to cost you $60,000. So on an annual basis, you'll want to have a couple of $1,000s more to replace that asset. So when you think about that overall on the capital budget, that's a significant amount that you need to have that number positive. So on the next page, we take that annual surplus of $4.6 million, and we add back the amortization, and we deduct the actual capital purchases that you made. So then you come down to your increase or decrease in net debt. So when you look at your increase or decrease in net debt, that number can be positive or negative, and a negative doesn't mean it's you're in a bad position. A negative, as you've budgeted for there, of a negative 3.5, means that you're in the cycle of your capital assets where you're taking money out of reserves. You've saved along the line, and now you're going to spend some of that reserve money that you've saved up to replace your capital assets. So again, a positive or negative is not good or bad. What you need to look at is how does your actual results compare to what you had budgeted. So you budgeted for a negative 3.5. If you had a bigger negative number, that would be bad, because then that would indicate a problem. But you had a positive number of 678, so that means you didn't have to use some of your reserves because some capital projects didn't go forward, or because you had an operating surplus, and also because you were able to put some extra money into reserve that you hadn't budgeted for. So that's why it's positive. So that's a good thing. Then the last statement we'll look at on page 6 is what happens to your physical cash in the actual bank account. So this is your cash. It does not include the investments. So about halfway down the page, you'll see that you brought in $11.6 million from operating. You spent $9.3 million in capital. You invested $1.8 million into GICs, and your debt, you repaid debt of $579,000. So your net actual cash in the bank decreased slightly at $179,000. That's not a concern, because your investments also went up during the year. So overall, the municipality ended the year with a surplus of $295,000 and had an overall positive net financial asset position of $1.5 million. So a very good year for the municipality. So that's the highlights. Hopefully that's so those are the draft financial statements that we asked council to approve. I also have the year-end, the blue report, which is a graphical look at some of the highlights from the financial statements. I'll take a quick run through of that, but are there any questions on the actual financial statements themselves? Once I get my pages back in order here from spilling them.
Seeing none, Tracy.
No questions?
That was good news.
Okay, so the blue report, again, is same numbers as the financial statements, but in a little less technical terms. On page 3, where are you today? It looks at those financial highlights that I talked about. Looking at your cash position has increased over the 5 years from 2014 to 2018, indicating a strong financial position. Your long-term debt has decreased from 2014 to 2018, from 9 million down to 5.9. The net financial assets and this is a very important financial indicator to look at. So again, you were in debt back in 2014, now you're in a positive position. So a dramatic increase in the right direction. The accumulated surplus, so this was the amount that was on the balance sheet, so this is a breakdown of what makes up your equity in the municipality. So the total invested in capital assets was $78 million. 2 million of that is currently unfinanced, so that has been an increase over the prior year. That's largely a result of the expenditures you've made on the library, so you haven't yet financed that. I believe you're looking at financing that with some long-term liabilities, long-term debt. So that's the major change there. Looking down into the reserves and the reserve funds, so there was $11 million in reserves and reserve funds compared to $7.4 million 5 years ago. So the increase in your cash is a direct correlation between your increase in reserves. As you increase your reserves, your cash position goes up. Page 4 looks at the cash flows. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. Page 5, looking at your tangible capital assets, where your capital assets are, what type of capital assets you have. The orange in the middle is your transportation, your roads and your bridges. The light blue is your sewer and water, so those make up a large portion of what your capital assets are. Page 6, looking at a comparison of your capital asset purchases compared to the amortization. So again, we talked about you want your purchases to be more than the amortization, because the amortization's based on cost and it takes a lot more to replace your assets. So you want the blue bar to be a lot higher than the red bar. So again, we're heading definitely in the right direction. Page 7 has some more details on taxation. Thing to note on that page is right at the bottom, the collection as a percentage of your current year taxes. So you're collecting 97% of your current year taxes. Always a good percentage. The rule of thumb is it should be at least over 90. Doing a good job on collecting your taxes on a regular basis. Page 8 looks at the assessments and the tax levy. Page 9, again, some more information on the taxation. Page 10, we're looking at revenues, comparing that to where you were 5 years ago in 2014. Page 11 is the comparison of the expenses to budget. So this is where I said I'd give you a report where you could compare apples to apples. So the budget amounts don't include amortization. The actual amounts on here do not include amortization. So you budgeted $17 million for expenses, for operating expenses, not capital. This is just operating. And you spent $16.1 million for operating purposes. Page 12 just gives you a breakdown of where those expenses, what departments those expenses were, and also how it's broken out between salaries and external purchases and contracted services. Lastly, looking at page 13, what do you have for the future? So again, this is very important to be able to replace your capital assets, making sure you have enough in reserve to do that you don't have to raise taxation, so that the taxation amounts are smoothed out every year. You have $4.2 million in obligatory reserve funds, so these were the ones that were in the deferred revenue on the liabilities on your balance sheet, so the development charges, recreation, land, and gas tax. And also looking at the reserves and the reserve funds, breaking those out in a little bit more detail, and at the end of the year, it had $11 million in reserves.
Very good news indeed. Always a pleasure to see you, Tracy, when you bring such good news to us. Thanks so much for your report.
Well, it is these last few years.
It has been great, yes, yes. Pleasure to look forward to your visit every year. Any questions, comments from council? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Tracy. And I know this question came up at county, and I'm going to ask it of you here as well. Reserves as a percent of total expenses and reserves of a percent of taxation. We slipped downwards a little bit in 2018 over 2017. Is that anything? I know the news has been generally so very, very positive, and we're very happy with that. But I'm just wondering if you could speak to those two percentages and that dip that we saw in 2018.
Yeah, so you want to make sure, as a percentage of taxation, it's important that you have enough in reserves and working capital that you're able to pay your expenses, and so that's a pretty high percentage, so that's pretty good. As to the total percentage as a total of expenses, that really is dependent on your capital asset management plan. So you really need to look to your capital asset management plan to determine whether you have enough resources for your future capital. There is no good or there's no set amount that I can say is a good number or a bad number. You really do have to go back to that management plan.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Tracy. And I don't know if this is a question for you or for Darcy. On page 21 of our agenda, or page 11 of your report, it's got contracted services of $3.8 million. That's police. What else is in there?
I'm guessing garbage, waste collection, and likely sewer and water management. Is that, no?
Through your worship, the two largest would be the waste management stuff, which is getting closer to $1 million a year, and the policing last year was about $1.9 million, so that's the lion's share of the two amounts. And then from there, it's anything that's been coded to contract services, so it might be something as simple as our dust suppressant for roads, or maintenance on vehicles, like undercoating spraying, or what. I mean, it could be a multitude of things.
Thank you.
Councillor Kentner?
We're certainly, those of us who came in the election in the fall are very lucky, because we're coming in on a high wave. It's really good. And I feel for the people who were here 4 years ago trying to turn things around. My question is that between 2014 and 2018, more of our successes, or at least less of our success, 8% less has come from the tax base. And in fact, 4% is other. What is other? Probably Darcy is the best source of that.
Well, I can tell you what a major portion of that is. It would be the building permits. So there's be an increase in the building permits, and as your economy has picked up. The other major portion of that would be investment income that's earned on the investments. I think those two would be the major things that would be another income.
Seeing that's it for questions, so I will thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to your visit next year.
Thanks. Or I won't get far.
Well, this is the point in the proceedings in the afternoon that we really welcome everyone to come here. It's a time for celebration for some of the folks in our community who have gone above and beyond, and it's time to recognize their efforts. This is the beginning of Accessibility Week, and it is our municipality's commitment to accessibility for all. within our municipality that is so important and is so near and dear to my heart, of course. This is a great way to celebrate this week, and in honor of our accessibility program, we have created a recognition program to promote greater accessibility and awareness. And this recognizes individuals, groups, and businesses within the municipality who have taken significant steps to create inclusive environments and to provide exceptional customer service. This year, members of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, some of whom are in attendance today, are very pleased to recognize 4 outstanding service providers. And these recipients are Bill's Value Mart, Len Neal, Louise Stewart Potts, and the Meaford Museum. The nominator for Bill's Value Mart commended them for going through the Breaking Down Barriers assessment to ensure accessibility for all. They praised their exemplary customer service and their continuing efforts to go the extra mile to assist people with disabilities, as well as providing opportunities for employment for individuals with developmental challenges. I'm not sure that we have someone here to accept the award from Bill's Value Mart, but I'll call you up in just a minute. Len Neal is currently a driver for the Specialized Transit Program in the municipality. His nominator is a regular user of Meaford Moves and recommended him for the award because of his tendency, again, to go above and beyond the call of duty to assist passengers, going so far as to help them set up for events and to take in their recycling bins. So congratulations to Len. Louise Stewart Potts is currently the instructor of the Movement for Life dance program that fosters inclusivity, creativity, and knowledge among participants from all walks of life. Her classes are especially designed for those with movement challenges as well as cognitive disabilities. Her nominator described her as a conduit for many individuals who want to be respected and safe as they contribute to our community. She enriches many lives, and congratulations to Louise as well. I don't see Louise here either. Oh, I see her nominator. She's had to teach, so we're a wee bit early then, are we, for Louise? That's too bad. The Meaford Museum has long been at the forefront of the accessibility commitment within the municipality by supporting a number of initiatives, including the Living Memories program, engaging conversations, conferences, and many accessible features and exhibits. In the words of their nominator, the museum is a sterling example of inclusiveness and acceptance in Meaford. And accepting the award on behalf of the museum is our long-term volunteer, Beverly LeGros. Beverly, congratulations. On behalf of Council, I'd like to congratulate all of our recipients for their commitment to accessibility, as well as to all of the countless other individuals and groups who strive every day to make this a community that can be enjoyed by all. Congratulations. If you'll come forward. So it looks like we only have 2 here from... Congratulations, Len. You're creating an inclusive environment and providing exceptional customer service. Just hang on a second, we'll get a group picture. And congratulations to Meaford Museum team for your volunteer work for creating, again, an inclusive environment and providing exceptional customer service. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll get the awards to these other folks as they appear. Any other questions?
Barry Altman, resident of Meaford, and I'd like to request to make a deputation on item D of the Committee of the Whole regarding 18 Boucher Street West. I realize that you have a lot of businesses transact tonight, and I request that I think it would make more sense if I made my deputation at the time that this is being discussed rather than to hold everybody up in here. So if that's acceptable, I did ask the clerk's office.
No, this is the time for your deputation. Please go ahead, Barry.
Okay, I asked the clerk's office this morning, and they said I had that opportunity of doing it later perhaps. So, okay, well, I'll start. Okay, obviously about the proposed development, 18 Boucher Street West. Anybody who was here last year in council knows about this. Okay. I was present, and my wife Bonnie, at the LPAT Case Management Conference. We noticed there was nobody from the municipality other than Liz Buckton, who was there at the request of the tribunal. I've read the entire report. I don't know if everybody here has had the opportunity to read the entire report. It's pretty dry, but obviously important to read. We've just studied that report and the staff report that goes along with it, and we have some comments that we wish to pass along. Okay. First off, the LPAT's a very different process than the OMB. It really only considers whether or not the planning rules have been followed, but does not in any way consider the particular merits or non-merits of any particular proposal. Okay. During the tribunal, it was noticed that the specific use of this property has not been anticipated in the zoning bylaw. Okay. Kind of interesting in this point, it actually supports our position that this is not a hotel if you follow the logic trail. The tribunal ruled that because the specific use is not addressed in the zoning bylaw, but is allowed in the municipal operating plan, that in a very narrow sense, the existing zoning bylaw fails to conform with the municipal operating plan. In other words, it did not anticipate the use of this property, and that's not really anybody's fault because things change. Okay? So, and that's part of our concern as well. What happens in this type of development is currently not controlled. Okay? In fact, the municipality has recognized that because currently I believe the staff is studying bylaws and deal with short-term accommodations that do not fall under the Hotel Act or Landlord and Tenant Act. And not just because of this property. Okay? I think the important takeaway from here is there's absolutely nothing in the LPAT process that changes concerns of the residents or in council when the initial bylaw amendment was turned down last year. Okay? They're still there and still need to be addressed. Okay? Tribunal has directed the municipality to make a decision within 90 days of their decision, which was, I believe, May 1st. It's a date that was actually received. So there's 90 days from there. There's really no necessity to make a decision or reply back to the developer tonight. As noted by the LPAT member, Mr. Tusa, at the case management conference, the municipality can uphold the initial decision, they can reverse the initial decision, or they can make any other decision. They only specify the decision needs to be made, not what it is going to be. Okay? Upholding the initial decision is obviously a non-starter because this would just go back to the same end result. Okay. The recommendation from staff to simply approve the original zoning bylaw amendment without changes is also very clearly a non-starter. This is why. A very clear majority of the council members, most of who are currently on council now, voted against the zoning bylaw amendment because of reasons that are still valid now. Going back to the original amendment would set a very bad precedent for future developments. What we're saying is just appeal and we'll do anything to avoid legal costs and we won't stand behind our decisions or the public. Consider what this process looks like to the public, okay? And this is, correct me if I've missed anything on here. There was a notice of proposed zoning bylaw amendment, public meetings, petitions, letters, presentations, clear majority of council voted against, recognized the concerns, voted against the amendment. Developer appeals, as he has every right to do. There were a number of closed council sessions. We do not know how it happened in theirs. The municipal clerk informed us after we'd sent a letter that the appeal was not going to be challenged and concerns would be dealt with through the site plan approval process. We confirmed after the case management conference with Liz Buckton that there is no public input in the case in the site approval plan process. So then we applied to LPAT to participate in the case management conference because in our opinion, the municipality forfeited their responsibility to support their own decisions and to represent us. As noted by Rob, and Rob will notice that in his report later, we were allowed to make a presentation. We were not allowed to participate because we were unable to address the legalities of whether this zoning amendment applies to provincial plans and so on. And Mr. Tusa acknowledged that, yes, for a layperson, that is a very onerous requirement. We would have had to hire a planner. So we're behind the 8 ball on that one. I'll talk about planners later. Okay. The tribunal relied solely on the input of one municipal planner who had also prepared the initial zoning bylaw amendment. So LPAD now directs council to revisit the decision, and now staff is recommending the zoning bylaw just be sent back out there in its original form. Thanks for showing up to the public meetings, but we're basically going to ignore everything you said for the last 10 months. I can tell you that the transparency in this is not very good. And any action taken by council right now is going to be very carefully scrutinized. Okay. So the correct decision is somewhere between these two extremes. First off, it does not need to be made today. Secondly, I approached Mr. Getz, the developer, after the case management conference, and we had quite a cordial discussion. We obviously have some differences in opinion, but we think that if we can talk together, we can come up with something that makes sense. And I'm prepared to talk to him about that. I said, we are reasonable people, but we obviously have some concerns. We don't want an empty lot across the street from us. We're not against development, but it's got to be good. It has to make sense. So that offer is still there with Mr. Getz, and I'm prepared to meet with him anytime, either by himself or with planning department. Okay. Mr. Armstrong's also offered to meet me to discuss this project, and thank you. I do appreciate that, and I do appreciate you letting me know of this meeting today. All right. I appreciate being kept in the loop. But I suggest that the meeting we have needs to be done before a decision is made on this, so that we're not going back and forth playing ping pong on this all summer like we did last year. It's going to be the easiest way to come to a decision that's going to basically flow through the system. Let's talk about it now rather than throwing stuff back and forth. I'm reasonable, but I do need to look after my own interests. A little bit about my background here. I'll explain to you later why. Okay, I'm a professional engineer. I have 40 years experience, including running large custom capital projects from contract negotiations right through commissioning. Contract values up to $200 million. I have had, at the peak, more than 60 professionals working in my department. So why is this relevant? I understand very clearly that although the details of any project are unknown while you're going through it, the final result and the rules need to be very carefully defined at the beginning. In my case, opinion, this is not the case in the zoning bylaw amendment as it is currently written. It is very open. Okay? I understand that staff needs to be supported, but they also need to be checked and guided. There's a gray area, and quite often it's a matter of knowing where that line needs to be in that gray area. Okay? I've also made this point at the case management conference. 40 years experience in engineering, I have a very good sense of what is real and what is fluff. That's about the politest way I can say that.
Mr.
So what
Waldman,
needs to be
Mr.
in
Waldman,
this
can you
decision?
wrap up, please? Your time
I
is
have very
over.
little to do finish, and say these decisions will affect us for a long time, so I'll take the time necessary. But I will do recognize you're busy, and I will not take more time than I need to. Okay, so what needs to be in this decision? There needs to be a very clear definition of the end use and the rules that are going to be associated with this. We owe this to the developer. He doesn't want to find out 6 months into here that all of a sudden you got 4 units instead of 6 because of whatever. Okay? What is this thing? It's neither chalk nor cheese. An Airbnb, short-term rental, multi-use residential. Okay? What do we regulate? How do we monitor what's in there? How do we know? Are we taxing? What are we taxing? Right? There's a whole pile of open questions here. How on earth do you mix long-term residents versus transients? Who's going to want to rent an apartment when you've got a new friend of chums showing up on a daily basis downstairs? We need to update the planning report, make it accurate, and make sure that requirements for all future uses are allowed. And I don't believe that's in there right now. Okay? There are many inconsistencies in that planning report.
Mr. Altman, please wrap up now. Your time is up.
Yeah?
Thank you very much for your presentation.
I'm going to
We
finish. Thank
understand.
you very much. No, you're not shutting me down like you shut my wife down last year. Thank you very much. Okay?
Mr. Altman,
In my opinion.
Mr. Altman, I'm sorry, but your time is up. You've overextended to 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
You constantly interrupt people every time.
I will finish, Barbara Klumpus. I will finish what I'm saying. Thank you very much. In my opinion, the current planning report and staff report are very heavily biased in favor of development and full of inconsistencies and rationalizations versus reasons. Sure, concerns the residents have not been addressed. Okay? I'm not a planner, but as a professional, I cannot believe that the initial bylaw amendment follows acceptable planning practice. It appears to have been pushed very far offside to make the development fit. As I stated in an earlier letter, I'm prepared to have this peer reviewed, and after some thought, I believe that should this be necessary, the most equitable way to do this would be through the Professional Association of the Planners. Finally, we have an opportunity now to do this the right way and show the public we can facilitate development while also respecting the rights of the public. Approving the same flawed bylaw amendment we rejected last year will not accomplish this. I'm done now.
Are there any other questions or deputations to come forward at this time? Any, please state your name and welcome.
My name is Lorraine Doyle. This is on right. There is a policy in development and a suggestion to defer a decision that I wish to speak to. So thank you, Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and councillors for listening to our concerns. And thank you to the Meaford municipality staff for working with us to resolve the issues concerning the north end of Concession 4, from which we access our farm. We have not always agreed with staff on the best way forward, but we have always been treated with courtesy. Our position is that the road remain public and Meaford continue the former precedent of maintaining full responsibility for it, or that they sell us our section of the road and we assume all responsibility. I really understand the preference staff have for keeping unopened roads public, but if the north end of Concession 4 is to remain public, my husband and I should not be asked to bear related costs. The current report discusses the danger of setting precedents in relation to selling or gating unopened roads. A previous precedent in our case needs to be acknowledged. Our house has been accessed off this road since 1890, and Sydenham and then Meaford have maintained and insured the road. The surprising decision to break with this precedent and cease all maintenance left us to deal with a road which, because of the erosion of one very steep section, was quickly becoming impassable, cutting off access to our house. The confusion around finding a solution to this problem has so far lasted 2 years, and that's a long time to live with this uncertainty. One solution offered was for us to buy our part of the road. We paid the $500 to start that process. The issue of landlocking our neighbors was raised, and I appreciate the very fair and real concerns staff have around this. We wouldn't wish to have access to our property compromised in any way, and would never compromise anyone else's access to their property. we agreed to grant the required right-of-way to the neighbours in question, the Wilsons. The owners of the other property in question have access from the south end of Concession 4, and when canvassed, they did not request a right-of-way to the north. Meaford staff was willing to sell each section of Concession 4 to adjacent landowners when this unfortunately, really unfortunately, proved difficult to negotiate with some landowners. Objections raised to selling just our portion of the road made reference to the same problems that would exist if the whole road was sold. So in either case, future options for the road would be limited. So I'm not sure what the objection is there. I don't know what shape the policy under development will eventually take, but any option that requires private citizens to maintain and ensure a public road at significant cost is, in our view, untenable and unfair. We, like everyone else, already pay taxes for that purpose. Given that no neighbour has objected to the sale of the road, and given that we have been left up in the air for a long time, I hope Council can vote on one of two solutions. Either revert to the precedent that was in place when we purchased our property, Concession 4 remains public and is therefore maintained by the municipality, or sell us the road and we will assume the related costs. So thank you very much for listening to my concerns.
Thank you, Mrs. Dahl. Appreciate your comments. Hi, welcome.
Hi, Madam Mayor, thank you very much, and councillors. I'd like to follow up with what my wife said, and just be a little bit more specific about the history of what we've experienced over the last 2.5 years. I present the following not with raised voice and anger, but quietly, passionately, and respectfully, hoping that the weight of reasonable argument will compel you to do the honourable thing and vote today to allow us to purchase our section of road, or if you're more comfortable, allow us a gated laneway agreement, which we would be willing to accept. As property owners, imagine yourself in our position as I read quotes from your staff and with regards to requirements asked for and received over the last 2 years. In the spring of 2017, after 20 years of the municipality maintaining our section of the road, they suddenly refused any further responsibility, which prevented our access to our house. From the spring of 2017 through to the spring of 2018, there were many back and forth emails to resolve the problem. On May 11th, 2018, Liz Buckton forwarded us the following email stating, "We should be aiming to transfer surplus allowances where feasible. However, should not be landlocking any properties as a result. A shared use driveway agreement over municipal lands would be considered as a last resort." On July 4th, 2018, we informed staff that we would give the Wilsons a right-of-way and clearly articulated that the second parcel would not be affected by our purchase. On July 7th, 2018, we were informed of all of the costs involved in the purchase and that to move forward with the purchase, we needed to send a check for $500 and sign an affidavit. On July 17th, 2018, we delivered the $500 and the affidavit. On September 7th, 2018, which was the final municipal deadline for community input, not a single neighbor voiced a concern regarding our purchase, including the Devonports, the owners of that second parcel of land that for some reason some staff seemed to be concerned about, and they didn't request a right-of-way. On September 10th, 2018, Mr. Robert Armstrong, in the report number DS 2018-55, stated that the planning staff had consulted with the Development and Infrastructure Committee and have determined that the unopened road allowance within lots 28 to 30 is not required for municipal purposes. It has been the staff's general position approach to recommend the sale of such surplus lands where a purchaser is available in order to minimize ongoing liability with respect to the lands. And further, in conclusion, wrote that the Development Services staff conclude that the lands are not required for municipal purposes. In early September 2018, having been led to believe that the municipality would sell us the road, and with the earlier permission given to fix problems in the road, and therefore allowing us to access our house, and the realization that if preventive maintenance didn't occur, much of the road would be lost. We spent over $6,000 to ditch the road. I admire the new way forward as outlined in Liz Buckton's May 27th, 2019 document. But if such a way forward is to be done honorably, the municipality must continue with past practices until a new policy is in place. In our case, the stopping of the past practice of performing maintenance on our section of road without a policy in place that set out clear rules was wrong. After being told that all maintenance would be discontinued, then told the best way forward was for us to buy it, and then a year later to be told that they changed their mind and now wanted us to maintain and pay insurance for a road used by the public is unfair. Further, at the March 11th council meeting, to be told after hearing our solutions for all of the staff's concerns, that staff still had one concern, that our purchase would create some unforeseen problem in some distant future. This is very frustrating in that a year earlier we were told that they saw no future problem with our purchase. To have been told that as long as we don't landlock anyone, and that if no neighbor has a problem with our purchase, then we can purchase. Then to be told that the goalposts have been moved. Suddenly, we could no longer buy our section of road because it is no longer staff policy to sell a part of a transversable road. Today in Liz Buckton's document on page 2, second paragraph, she shows an acceptance of the fact that this roadway is not traversable. I appreciate this acknowledgement and what should be its obvious consequence. I have some questions and concerns in this May 27th document. Firstly, on page 1, last paragraph, to still be referencing 2 landlocked parcels when it has been clearly reasoned that there is only one, and to reference a concern that our purchase would somehow in some unspecified way interfere with their future access is unsubstantiated. The Wilsons were given a right-of-way, the Devonports didn't ask for one, and every criteria that was given by staff to satisfy this concern was met, and yet still the staff have some vague and undefined issue. This is frustrating. Secondly, the last paragraphs of page 2, what implications would be problematic with a gated private use lane? Not stating a single possible implication is not helpful. And further, that this specific circumstance may create an undesirable precedent. Again, this is vague and not helpful. If someone in the future cites this as a precedent, and they too have no neighbors with issues, if they too are willing to grant a right-of-way, and they too are wanting to buy a part of a, in fact, untraveled allowance, and they too started negotiations over 2 years ago, they too should similarly be allowed the same consideration. It is worth noting that the staff have used what they refer to as similar examples to argue their position that don't stand up to scrutiny, such as the one referenced in report number DES 2018-55, the case of Stewart's request for purchase, where I know that neighbors voiced objections. This is clearly not similar in that in our situation, no neighbor had a concern. This only muddies the waters and makes it more difficult for council to do what is right. When is it fair? When is it at the right point in a timeline to decide that a particular precedent is a precedent too far? In fact, that our house was built on the 4th concession in 1890, and for 130 years has had a lane off this same road, and that during our 20 years of ownership, you maintained our section of road, and this did not create a precedent worth your consideration, then surely now you can't say with any sense of fairness that suddenly our creating a precedent with our purchase or our gated laneway agreement does matter. And just
Are you almost finished, Mr. Doyle?
Yes,
Your time is up.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And finally, a suggestion for those responsible for this new policy development. In it, you should be not requiring any citizen of the municipality to have to, on their own, pay to ensure a public road for public use. We, all of us together, already do this with our taxes. In summary, we're asking for council to make a decision today. We have shown a willingness to compromise. If not the municipality taking full responsibility for this public road, then we get to buy it. If not this, then we should be willing, we would be willing to accept a gated laneway agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you. Okay, is there anything further in the public? Okay. Can you please try to contain your presentation to 5 minutes?
I only
Thank
have one
you.
page.
Oh, good, excellent, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a follow-up
And your
to,
name is, sir?
My name is Don Churchill, and I'm here on behalf of the South Georgian Bay Cycling Association. And I assume that every member of council received and read our emailed submission from last Friday addressing the omission of the safety shoulder on the 4th Side Road Rehabilitation tender. Sorry? I thought there was a question back here. Following the Committee of the Whole meeting on the 13th, we contacted two professionals for their opinion if the shoulders on the uphill section, westbound section, could support paved shoulders. So we spoke with Gary Shaw, a long-time, I think 30-some-odd years, Director of Transportation for the County of Grey, and quote-unquote, I looked at that hill yesterday. I do see lots of cyclists on that section of Frogs Hollow Road every day. I cannot see why, when they pulverize the road or dig out to replace it with good granular material, that they could not pave out to the grass line on both sides of the road. There is the width there now to support it. Glenn Gibbons, a retired roads foreman for Grey County, who was involved in many paving shoulder reconstructions, also, quote, confirms the existing platform is adequate to support paved shoulders. Further, we contacted the sales manager at Miller Paving. When asked if Miller Paving has experience in adding paved shoulders to asphalt roadways, he answered, oh God, yes. Given that the recommended tender came in at $53,000 under budget, and two, that this is the first paved shoulder experience on a rural road in Meaford, and three, that there is adequate time to request an addendum to the tender that which allows 30 construction days over a 90-day work period. So the rationale for an amended tender is one, the selected contractor has proven experience in building paved shoulders. Two, that paved shoulders minimize the inconvenience of vehicles, namely trucks, currently forced to climb at 4 to 7 kilometers an hour behind cyclists when they're present. And three, paved shoulders have proven to mitigate the risks to cyclists sharing the same road surfaces with motor vehicles. So we recommend that council request an amendment to the Side Road 4 tender, asking the contractor to determine the viability and cost of adding paved shoulders to the contract. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Churchill. Appreciate your time. Okay, I'll ask one more.
Yes, in connection with the busing, we hope that...
Can you tell us your name, please, sir?
My name is Ben Cortland.
Thank you, Ben.
20 years ago, I came from Toronto and I worked to the wheel trends. And so I drove many disabled people around. And so now I'm concerned about the busing, that you will continue that. Many people use it for appointments, dialysis, shopping, going to work, etc., etc. And able people will complain that the Wheel-Trans bus happens to be empty because of cancellations. These things do happen. It's indeed very expensive, but you can do without it, really. And Meaford has many people who need this service. The population consists of people who are elderly and often disabled and living alone. They cannot always rely on kind relatives, if they do have relatives, or friends. People come from out of town to visit a relative in the hospital and we need transportation. Perhaps the council could get in touch with the system, other systems in other areas. Please don't let it down, and we can keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Okay, one more. This will be the last one. Thank you.
My name is Sherry Shorthouse, and I'm a friend of Ben's. We're all very concerned about the future of Meaford Transit. I'm not from here, but I've been using this bus every day, 3 or 4 times a day. And when I heard that it was going to be discontinued at the end of June, I was really alarmed. And I guess we want to know basically why that is, because apparently this was a pilot project, was supposed to be sustained for a couple of years. Sounds like the municipality is doing very well financially. And public transit is never meant to make money. It's meant to serve the community. So I think there was a lot of confusion. I've only been in town here for 3 weeks, but a lot of the people downtown didn't understand the schedule at all. They thought it was only specialized transit service for people disabled needing to go door to door, where you do have a bus where anybody can ride for $2. Even children are using this bus. And if there is a reason that it has to be discontinued, maybe somehow we could keep it at least through the summer so that kids can go, you know, to the park and wherever they have to be, soccer games, summer camp. I would be very sad to lose this. So that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you very much for your comments, and welcome to Meaford.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move another one.
Mrs. Hoppus, I am for the transit bus. The only way that we actually found out about the removal of the bus was one of the gentlemen that rides the bus. He lives up on Parker Street. He is severely disabled. He cannot get into the door-to-door mobility van. He feels more comfortable in the $2 van. He was speaking with one of the councilmen. I think his name is Mr. Vickers. He went up to Mr. Vickers and asked him and told him what a great service this was to Meaford, that a lot of people depend on this. And he was the one who informed Wayne that the bus will be leaving on June 30th. So in my opinion, if Wayne had not spoke to the councilman, us residents of this town would never have known that it was leaving. The lady who drives the van, Zana, she was going to move here. She was going to have a business here, but her life now is up in the air because she doesn't know what she's going to do. I myself, for riding the bus, I have acquired 4 part-time jobs up on Paul Street, cleaning people's homes. As of June 30th, I'm going to have to tell these elderly people that I can no longer work for them because I cannot afford the $18 each day to go to work. There's a woman who lives down at by Dairy Queen. She works at Tim Hortons. She uses the van to go to work. She uses the van to go shopping here in this town. She cannot afford the $18 for taxis. That means that she's going to have to get a wagon and pull the wagon up that hill, winter, summer, all the time, because the van is going to it's going to leave. Children are getting on the bus. The parents feel better that they're getting on a bus for safety issues, walking to school, walking home from school. It was poorly advertised right from the get-go. We would like to see extended through the summer, where the van will be able maybe to change the route of the van, to have it go down to Memorial Park to pick up the tourists, to bring them up into Meaford, to have like almost a tour guide of Meaford, to bring it to the different retail stores. All the retail stores are behind us. Bring them to the bike shops that's on Bridge Street. There's a stop, there would be a stop, we'd like a stop there to bring them to the bike place so they can get off the bus, tour Meaford. When people are coming up to go shopping that are tourists down there at Memorial Park, to have the van be there to drive them into town. People are dropped off at Dairy Queen, at different places here. More people are getting on the bus because they want to come to the library. If they don't have accessibility to the library, they become, there's the community breakfasts every Wednesday, the community suppers once a Thursday. We'd like to see the van extend their hours a little bit more. It would be a terrible thing for this van to leave town. It's not made to make money. It's made to service the people here in this community. We would like it to see it be in parades, to really advertise this. But as of June 30th, I am going to lose my jobs because the van will be leaving. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Appreciate your comments. All right. With that, I think we'll move on to council inquiries, and I would ask council to bring forward any general inquiries you have at the moment. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The provincial government has come out with a plan, and the plan is that they want each municipality to cut 4% out of their budget. They're going to give you $150,000 to help do that. I was just wondering if this council would be interested in going in that direction. I don't think you have to come up with 4%, but you have to try. I don't think there's 4% there to get, but my concern is with the provincial government we have right now, if we do not take place in this exercise, would we then be cut out of any future government funding? That's what scares me about that, and I think it's something we should maybe look at. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob, do you have a response to that?
Thank you, Worship. With regard to that, we're not sure of the details of that yet. I read a letter that we received from the Premier today, and he speaks of that funding to do the audit services for large cities, and he also speaks to the fund that we've already got to look at efficiencies, which Council's already dealt with. So we're not even sure we're getting that funding at this time. If we do, that we'll have to evaluate at this time, but we're not expecting that.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I was wondering about the gates into the cemetery off Swarthmore Drive. Was by there and noticed those gates are closed. And usually by this time of the year, that entrance to the cemetery is open. It's such a beautiful drive down that treed lane, and I just wondered when we could expect to see those gates opened up.
Through your worship, we had an issue with some down trees that we're having to get a contractor to come in and deal with. And once that's been dealt with, I believe that we'll then be opening up the gate to allow for through traffic through there.
Traffic. Thank you, Darcy. Councillor Kentner.
I have a question regarding the $4,600 federal grant toward the municipality's Canada Day celebrations. I assumed when I first heard about this that the added support would be divided equally for Canada Day programs in Annan, Leith, Bognor, and Meaford. However, I have heard that possibly the full amount is to be added to events in urban Meaford, and I just wondered if that is the case.
Through your worship, this particular grant we've received every year since 2013. It has always been allocated to the Canada Day celebrations in Meaford and it actually forms part of the budget that council has approved. If that money is now split between other celebrations, then the activities in Meaford will have to be scaled back. Both the Bognor Canada Day celebrations and the Leith Canada Day celebrations will be before Council next week for the Community Bursary Programme, and that's the opportunity that Council has and has had in previous years to award funds to those groups.
Thank you,
For your
Matt.
answer.
Councillor Vickers?
Through your worship, at our last meeting, we had a concern about the upkeep of a certain grave at the cemetery, and I just wondered if there was anything more that the staff could help us out to understand what the issues were during that.
Through your worship, yes, I think that we as staff were pretty much just as concerned as council was when this came forward. The next morning I spoke with the Parks and Facilities folks, and they actually provided me quite a lengthy documented email back with regards to all the steps that have been taken since that November burial. I think at the end of the day they've done an admirable job, and we're continually checking that site along with all the other ones where we have winter burials. In all reality, I think that if we want this to cease happening in the future, the way to cease it from happening is to stop doing winter burials. It's my understanding that we, along with the City of Owen Sound, are the only two cemeteries in the entire region that actually do winter burials. Nobody else does them, in large part for these reasons. So that's something that we may consider in the future. But I think that from my staff's perspective, at least, understanding the pictures that they had documented and the number of times that they had gone out to that site, they've done the best that they could, given the circumstances. But unfortunately, in winter burials, the material continues to settle until the spring.
Just as an aside to that, my husband and I rode our bikes up all through the cemetery, and we went through each of the rows, and it looks really good up there. There's no real discernible. There's only one spot, and it looked as though it had been created by a vehicle of some kind. So it's looking good. Councillor Kentner.
Just further to that, I would just like to say that the comments I made at the last council meeting respecting a grave site that had caved in, I attended about 3 days later, and staff had done an excellent job of filling and leveling that site. And I just want to be very clear, I have no criticism whatever of the job our staff does. I am concerned about the service level to the cemetery and our approach to staff deployment. So at a future meeting, I will bring forward a motion that we perhaps take a second look at how we manage the upkeep of Lakeview Cemetery. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you. Okay. Then we'll move on to number 8, motions for consideration. And the first one is our consent agenda. We have a number of items that we've seen before. The CUL 2019-04, to direct the staff to develop a strategic plan for the Meaford Museum. The second one, DES 2019-28, is a signed variance for a newly established bed and breakfast at 182 Noble Street. Third one is FIM 2019-27, the 4th Canada Division Training Centre PILT appeal. This is a request to write to the Minister of Public Works and Government Services regarding the current dispute advisory panel appeal and the need to formalize a standard tax class for the 2020 taxation year and beyond. D is FIM 2019-28, that the municipality approved the submission of the Connecting Links program application for the Syke Street North infrastructure replacement and road reconstruction project. E is FIM 2019-29, an award of tender for fuel tank replacements in the tune of $217,780. And F is FIM 2019-30, again an award of tender for the Sideroad Rehabilitation to E.C. King Contracting for $609,925 for a hot mix asphalt road resurfacing. G is the LIB 2019-01, the Interlibrary Loan Service, and this is to endorse the importance of the Interlibrary Loan Service provided by the Southern Ontario Library Service, and that we send a letter to the Ministry of Tourism that asking them to reconsider the recent SOLS funding cuts. That's it for the consent agenda. Are there any on those on that list that folks would like to pull? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think I would like to pull item F, the fourth side road. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Greenfield, did you? No, that was it? Okay. Same. And Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to pull G and just give comment on it. Thank you.
All right. Then can I have a mover and a seconder to put on the consent agenda A, B, C, D, E, and that's it. Councillor Bartley and Councillor Greenfield. Thank you. All in favor, please? And that is carried. So we'll move into FIM 2019-30, an award of tender for the Fourth Side Road Rehabilitation. And Councillor Bell, will you pull that on the table? And do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Kentner? Okay. Did you wish to speak to that, Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that with the comments that I know all members of council have been receiving, that the public are really bringing this to the forefront for council's consideration. But my comment will be directed to Mr. Chapman and also to our clerk from the aspect that we have got before us, tenders that have been put out, tenders that have been addressed by corporations, and they have submitted their quotations, what they feel. And the numbers have been presented to us. And what kind of position does it put the municipality in if at this point we are to change the criteria and the desire? Because in my mind, that would go back to the very beginning. And if I was a contractor who had submitted a quotation on this, and to have it changed at this date, I would feel that this is changing everything. So my question on the public input about wanting a bike lane or adding pavement to the side, and having comments this evening from other folks that this could be done, what I'm asking is for conversation from our treasurer and from the clerk on the technicalities of the situation of where we are at right here this evening.
Through your worship, from a purchasing perspective, I mean, quite often we deal with contemplated change orders in the field because you get into something like on a road and all of a sudden you find a culvert that was buried 2 feet under stuff that you didn't know was there, or all of a sudden you hit a kind of a French drain somewhere and you got to deal with water or whatever. Those things happen all the time, and the intention is as soon as something like that occurs, you go out to that awarded contractor and ask them for a price immediately. If you think the price is too high, you can negotiate somewhat, but ultimately, typically with change orders, the contractors kind of got you over the barrel, for lack of a better term. And that's why we don't like doing them, because most people realize in the construction industry that change orders are a good way of making really good profit. So, because there's nothing to hold them to competition with another vendor to try and make sure that they're actually having to give the best price. So we try our best to make sure that we actually know what it is that we want, but sometimes things happen in the field that you just don't understand. If we're looking at bike lanes, paved shoulders, whatever they might be, there was an email that was circulated to all the council last week from our consultant that we used on this project, who's got 35 years of engineering experience. And as per his comments, I would think that it would be best, if we want to look at that we cancel we do not award this tender. We engage engineering services to do a proper analysis of that road and to design it properly, and then go back out to tender. Now, what this will mean because of timing is that we will do the construction of that road next year.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and to that end, if I was a corporation that just a little while ago was planning on doing some work, because there's some financial retribution, because basically this council could pull the rug out from me, the corporation that's already been planning to do some work, and they're going to lose the work.
Through your worship, quite often, contractors have a state of claim for loss of profit if we are doing bid calling. So if there really was never an intention to award the contract, like if we issued a contract, I don't think that that would be the case here, that, it's a matter of bid calling. What's happened is if councils had we had $700,000+ in the budget. It's not like we were just out there kicking tires to see what we were going to get, right? So if council's had a change of heart and wants to go in a different direction, and then we now need to, redesign the scope of the project, I think that, we can not have that fear of repercussion. Besides the fact that the companies who've bid on this have done a bunch of work for us in the past, are doing work for us already this year, and will continue to do work for us in the future. So I don't think that they would want to strain the relationship either, and just recognize that, they'll have another kick at this next year if it doesn't get awarded right now.
Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've got really mixed feelings on this. One is, do we set a precedent and start putting bike lanes in? I know all the arguments about Frogs Hill. I understand that immensely. And my query would be to the cyclists, not that I need an answer now, is I went down there and the road to Frogs Hollow from Thornbury is in rough shape and it does not have bike lanes. So for what reason would we pay extra for bike lanes? Having said that, my feeling is that my query is we have one professional telling us it's going to cost a fortune, and now there's 3 other professionals telling us it's not going to cost very much at all. I would like a better answer, and it would cost us nothing, I believe nothing, to ask for the quote, like you said, from E.C. King, could you extend the shoulders 18 inches or 14 inches, and just get the price, and then we go from there. Is that a possibility?
Through your worship, I think that the municipality employs respectable individuals who have experience in their field. I'm not talking about me on the roads. I'm talking about the people that we have underneath me, who have 25 years of road experience or who are CETs. And to this end, because we knew that this road was important enough, we actually went out and hired a third-party consultant who worked for Ainley Group for over 30 years and now works for another company part-time because he's semi-retired. To be honest, I don't care what those other professionals say. You have hired professionals, both on payroll and through consulting services, that are saying that adding, a half-meter strip is not a solution on this road, that the road bed won't take it, that we would have to actually properly design it. The problem with that road, in large part, is not the road itself, it's the ditches. A new constructed road, properly constructed, has a 3-to-1 slope on the ditches. These the ditch line in there at best has a 2-to-1 slope. So if you pave right to the grass shoulder, which these other professionals are trying to tell you to do, there is no way that we can actually maintain what gravel shoulder would be left. And literally, this is the reality. We will have guys out there with shovels and wheelbarrows putting gravel along the edge because you can't run a grader along that. There's no equipment. It literally would have to be done by hand. So there are real consequences to this. By adding a paved shoulder even on one side and not the other, as soon as you pave that, you get close to other infrastructure. And as soon as you are X number of meters away from other infrastructure, being hydro poles and things like that, you now have to have roadside safety devices. That's part of the Ontario Traffic Manual with regards to road design. So there are areas where if we pave one side but not the other, like people have suggested, we may actually come in too close a proximity to hydro poles, which means that we would have to put guide rail systems up. That's why this has to be designed properly if it's not a like for like. I mean, we have to recognize that I understand the issue that the cyclists have, but if you've driven that road, realistically, we don't have much of a road surface there, but the road surface that we've got is probably, decent shape is 5 meters wide, because it's certainly not too 2 lanes wide because the meter on either side is pretty much done. The road surface itself is somewhere between 6.6 and 6.8 meters wide. They're going to end up with a brand new road, fully asphalted, that is 7 meters straight. It's 7 meters wide all the way along, and it'll be a brand new road. So that's what this project will do. If council wants more than that, my suggestion would be to follow the suggestion of the professional engineers that we have used, cancel this tender, design it properly, go back out next year.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think back, likely 2 or 3 years ago, I strongly suggested that Frogs Hollow be reconstructed. And it seems to me at that time I suggested that bike lanes be included in the reconstruction costs. I'm not going back on that. I think the advantage of having bike lanes or at least paved shoulders, and there seems to be different interpretations as far as widths are concerned and so on and so forth. I still think that's the right way to go. And that would mean, yes, that we would have to go back basically to right to the start and re-tender this. I'm not opposed to that, but I feel very bad because I have promised a lot of people along that road that they're going to get a new road this year, and that bothers me, that I can't keep a promise that I've made. But this isn't, Frogs Hollow isn't going to come back again in 2 or 3 years, 4 or 5 years. This is our one chance. And it seems to me that we should try our utmost to do it right this time. So if that means starting over from scratch, let's at least get it priced. May end up that this fall, when we're discussing the budget for 2020, we decide, hey, that extra $500,000 we just can't do, regardless of the assurances we've had. Mr. Shaw and Mr. Gibbons have been named. Between them, they had almost 70 years experience with the county. You can't doubt that. Mr. Cousiar, whom I've been very familiar with since way back in St. Vincent Township days. Mike knows this township and the road system likely better than anybody else around. It's a tough decision to make, but I would favor, let's go back, let's price it, and let's consider it for not 2020, but unfortunately it will have to be 2021.
Councillor Vickers.
Yeah, I would agree with Harley. You know, if we're going to do this, it is going to put it back a year. You know, I would be interested to know what the numbers are. It doesn't seem like we have opinions and we have but no hard numbers to go with it. If those bike lanes were going to cost another $150,000-$200,000, I don't think I'd go for it. You know, if they're going to cost more than you know, I don't know what number I'd be happy with. It's just, I think the problem that I'm struggling with right now is that there doesn't seem to be a number that we can compare, that it's going to cost this to recap it, or this is what it's going to cost to get the bike lanes in. And you know, maybe having bike lanes is a whole nother discussion. You know, are we willing to go that far? And you know, where are bike lanes going to be allowed or permitted, and where they aren't? I noticed this weekend that instead of them coming down the hill and turning right to go down to Frogs Hollow, they're coming across the 7th, from the 7th line. So, you know, it seems like we're chasing something that we don't have a real good idea is of what's going on. And maybe it's just myself, as a counselor, I don't feel I've got enough information, and I don't feel comfortable making the decision one way or the other.
Darcy, you
Through your worship, I just would like to step in and say that this is exactly what as staff we would want. The road was tendered and designed based on the current standard that we have, because we don't have, first of all, I would never want to call them bike lanes, because as soon as you do, there is a completely different set of standards that we would have to uphold, which is far more stringent than just regular road standards. So I would call them paved shoulders, which is what the county's calling them. The county's not calling them bike lanes either. They're calling them paved shoulders. The reason that the county has put paved shoulders in is because over an 18-year period, it's less expensive from a maintenance perspective to pave the shoulder than to worry about gravel and then having to, continually grade them and so on. That's why the county made that decision back, 5-8 years ago. So I would suggest two things. First of all, the county is going through a cycles and trailing master plan right now, which should be done this year. So this could, we could wait for that to inform all the lower tiers as to where the possible cycling routes would be, so that we're making the best decision for cycling related things. And secondly, instead of just canceling this tender, that council actually directs staff to bring back a paved shoulder policy, so that you guys can look at it to understand, where and when and why we would actually pave shoulders. Because this shouldn't be taken as this is the thing that from staff's perspective we're really concerned about, is that we're not looking at what this precedent will do to set across the board and where this could change service standards. So council wants to change the level of service. I'm absolutely fine with it. I think we should have a policy that dictates where we would do these things, and as staff we can develop that and bring it back. Because right now the policy that we would use is very simple. When you're doing road design, there's the Ontario Traffic Manual. Book 18 is specific to cycling. Book 18 would suggest that on this road, it's a 60K road. We wouldn't even start to consider warranting needs for cyclists until you hit at least 1,000 cars a day on a road that's at 60K. The daily traffic on that section of road is just under 400. So we're nowhere near where we would need to be based on provincial standards for cycling lanes of any kind. So I think that Councillor Vickers is right on spot with regards to bringing a policy back.
Councillor Kentner.
I'd like to support that, and also for once say I agree with Mr. Chapman. I do. I am wondering if this isn't also an opportunity to for staff to talk to staff in Thornbury and Town of Blue Mountains and find out when they're planning to rebuild, and whether we can collaborate in any way to. This is a new sport that's coming to the area, and it's bringing a ton of money with it, because the people who are doing this are going to be building $1 million homes in the next 10 years here. They're going to retire far earlier than any of us ever thought of it, and I think that we really need to be taking a long look at it. So I would not fight taking a year to just get it right, but I don't understand why we wouldn't talk to Town of Blue Mountains and see if we can't coordinate in some way.
So through your worship, we talk with staff all the time. We had a regional cycling meeting not that long ago. I spoke with my counterparts over there. They don't have any short-term plans to fix that chunk of road. It's maybe not even medium-term plans. The reason that the road got fixed to where it did, and it ends at Binkley's, has nothing to do with cycling. It's because of the agricultural sector that wanted that road to be paved right up to there, so that they didn't have to worry then about half loads. So that's why the road was reconstructed and upgraded, was to make sure that they didn't have to worry about the half load season, so that they could still truck apples in and out to Binkley's. So it had nothing to do with cyclists whatsoever.
Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, thank you. I'm just wondering, Mr. Chapman, where does safety and liability fall into our discussion here in relation to that quite steep hill on the Sideroad, and recognizing that does, in my opinion, pose some challenges for cyclists today? And second part of my question is, and I support Councillor Greenfield in the thought of let's get this right. We're only going to get one shot at this. Let's do it right. And my hope would be that if we went back to the drawing board this year, that could we not do construction in 2020?
Through your worship, so second part first, absolutely, we could design it this year, tender it, November, December, January, with a spring, like late spring start into May, June, and construct in 2020. As far as liability, there is no more or no less liability on the municipality with regards to the road and the condition of it, even it's in right now, as long as we maintain it to the minimum maintenance standards, unless council actually deems bike lanes. If we say that they are bike lanes, then there is the potential for significantly more liability because we have a different standard that we have to uphold from a maintenance perspective. So as long as it's just a paved shoulder, it's just a paved shoulder. And, the responsibility, and this is what I said at the last meeting, that my, real opinion of this is that it is about communication, whether that means signage, again, on designated cycling routes and everything else. The motoring public has to recognize that they must share the road with cyclists. There is a law that says that you have to give a 1 meter wide berth to cyclists. So it's the car or the truck driver that needs to understand that if they can't give that meter wide path because somebody's coming on the opposite lane of traffic, they have to slow and wait their turn to then go around safely. Just like if it was a slow moving piece of farm equipment or a horse and buggy or somebody walking on the side of the road. We all have to share the road.
Okay, Councillor Bell, and then I'll call a
Thanks,
question.
Madam Mayor. It's
I
very
will call
quickly.
a
So
question.
we've had cases currently where ratepayers are expecting to have something done. And in this case, it's paving of this road. And we've heard from those that, are the cyclist community. All the other folks that haven't said anything about this are looking for their road to get paved. And they're the ones that's now going to take the opportunity to engage us and say, I'm now going to wait another year for this to happen, and it could end up that the money comes in that we don't know at this point, and we're going to turn it down then, and then we're going to come back and we're going to say, you've waited another year, and on the interim, the work crews have had to go out there and put the money, good money, in after bad. So, for me, I wanted to engage in this subject. I wanted to hear from my fellow councillors on this. So what we're really looking at is whether we're going to wait a full year, basically, but we'll have some numbers. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Through your worship, I don't want to scare council away from this, but I know that there have been numbers out there from the public and from other experts on the public side of things saying that this should be able to be done for $25,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 to do a proper shoulder that then can be maintained after the fact. It is going to be substantial six figures. That's why as staff, we didn't design or budget for a paved shoulder, because it was going to be, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of dollars. And to do it properly, and especially if we have a policy that establishes what the paved shoulder is, not just, slapping down an extra, 50 centimeters of asphalt here, there, wherever we can, it is going to be costly.
Okay, Councillor Vickers.
But what I struggle with as a councillor is not having those hard numbers, and I guess that's what I struggle with. We're making decisions on advice, good advice, but we don't have the hard numbers to go by. So I think we either have to come to the decision that we are just going to recap it, or that we're going to take more time and at least consider putting the bike lanes in. Not bike lanes, paved shoulders. Sorry about that, Darcy. Paved shoulders. So, I think that's really the question that, I'm struggling with it right now. And, we've started talking about it, more information has came up. And, I'm trying to think on the run here as fast and as hard as I can. And, I guess this is why we get paid the big money.
That's right. There's no bonus, though. All right, Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the way to solve this, and I'm willing to put forward an amendment to defer decision on Sideroad 4 until costs for reconstruction with paved shoulders are researched and a paved shoulder policy is brought forward.
Matt?
Can I
From a
suggest
process.
a friendly suggestion for some words for that motion? Just because I think we need to, if we defer something, then that's very different from giving different instruction. So what I would suggest is that the motion be amended by replacing the text of the motion with the following. That the Council of the Municipality of Meaford, 1, decline to award the tender for Side Road 4 reconstruction. 2, direct staff to engage an engineering consultant to design the Side Road 4 reconstruction project, including paved shoulders, for planned construction in 2020. And 3, direct staff to bring forward a paved shoulder policy for Council's consideration as part of the Transportation Master Plan. I believe that may have been what you said, Deputy Councillor Greenfield.
Is that exactly what you meant?
That's
Practically what you were going to say. All
I
right.
just, as long as, and I don't think we have to, but we're going to be putting this off for a year, and just as long as it's very conclusive that this is next year, that this is not 2019, but 2020.
Through your worship, the suggested words that I have say for planned construction in 2020, council of course will always have opportunities to make other decisions. You have a budget process to go through that this project would have to be added to, and I suspect the director's hope would be that we would have an engineer's numbers and design before we had to go through that budget process so that you can budget accordingly.
I just have a question to ask on that for clarification. You've asked in sequential order to decline this award. Number 2 is to design the redesign of the reconstruction, including paved shoulders. And number 3 was to create a paved shoulder policy. What happens if the paved shoulder policy would not substantiate number 2 in that amendment?
I think if the paved shoulders policy didn't substantiate it, we would, I believe the plan for the Transportation Master Plan is that we move through that process as well, so council would have the opportunity to weigh the cost of the designed project against that policy and decide which they wanted to do.
Okay. I was just wondering if you would put number 3 as number 2, reverse those numbers, if that makes a difference.
I don't think it makes a difference. I think if we want to get an engineering consultant to design this road, we will have to probably do some degree of an RFP for this, because I imagine it will be some costly, so we need to get moving on that project so that council has those numbers before the next budget process.
Okay. All right. Is everyone clear? Deputy Mayor?
Just for clarity, Your Worship, so are we then talking paved shoulders on the entire section of the road, or one side or the hill?
Through worship, I guess that would come through the paved shoulder policy. I think if you're going to do paved shoulders, you're doing paved shoulders. The recognition is that road, and why the cyclists are worried about it is because it's pretty much a turtleback, right? So 3/4 of the road is either going uphill or downhill. So it's really about paving the shoulders on the entire section of road.
Councillor Bell.
For the budgetary process, we would need to have it in place, what we would revert to. So when this goes out, we need to know the number we have tonight is for paving, tonight. A year from now, we need to know what paving is, and what the paving is with the paved shoulder. We need to be able to put that out.
Through worship, you mean through the tender?
Yeah.
So that wouldn't work if there's bid calling, right? Where now you're trying to determine based on whatever cost you want. That's not how this would work. If council decides that they want paved shoulders based on the engineer's estimate, based on the design, that's what we build into the budget. That then go out to tender for. If council decides not to, then we don't. I mean, that's like, I understand what.
3 years.
I understand exactly what council. I understand what council's desire is here. Certainly through Mr. Vickers trying to understand what the hard and fast numbers are. The hard and fast numbers that we always use through this process are budget numbers, and they're based on prior projects or based on a consultant's estimate. You don't go out and tender and then decide what you pick and choose from the menu. It's not McDonald's. We can't do it that way.
And for you, Madam Mayor, to add to that, I think if we had a report from an engineering consultant with the design of the reconstruction, including paved shoulders, council will be able to compare that to this year's budget for just the paving. Yeah, plus or minus an inflation rate if you so wish. So you would have two numbers to work on the basis of, they just wouldn't be tendered numbers.
So we have an amendment on the books with a mover. Councillor Greenfield, you're happy with that amendment as presented, and we need a seconder for that amendment. Councillor Vickers, thank you. Okay, I will call a question on the amendment. All in favor of this amendment going forward? 2, 3, 4, and those against? And that is carried. Okay, so then we need to go back and decline the original motion.
So yes, you've now replaced the original motion with the text that I read, which I can read again, but you will have to vote again on that text because it is now the final motion.
So that effectively declines the original motion, okay?
No, so your second vote would be just on the stuff that we've added, which would now say that Council of the Municipality of Meaford, 1, decline to award the tender for Sideroad 4 reconstruction, 2, direct staff to engage an engineering consultant to design a Sideroad 4 reconstruction project, including paved shoulders, for planned construction in 2020, and 3, direct staff to bring forward a paved shoulder policy for Council's consideration as part of the Transportation Master Plan.
Okay. And that one is, Councillor Bell, you moved that originally. Are you still willing to move that amended version? Okay, and Mr. Kentner, are you still willing to? All right, all in favor of that motion? And those against? And that is carried. Moving on to LIB 2019-01, the Interlibrary Loan Service. Councillor Bartley, you asked to have that, to move that on. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Greenfield, thank you. And did you wish to speak to that?
I just wanted to comment on that, and thank you, Madam Mayor. And I'm expecting to get some books thrown at me or whatnot, but I just want everybody to understand, I 100% understand the importance of a library and everything it does. I understand that immensely. The province of Ontario is paying $36 million a day in interest. We are living above our means, and we have to do some cuts. We have to do it. There is going to be cuts on every section of what we do, and I don't think we should balk at each one. Every section is going to be hit with something. And to turn a blind eye to the debt and where the debt is going, I think is wrong. And I don't think we should be balking. What we're trying to do is to get the debt closer to nothing, because right now $36 million a day and building. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kentner.
Come at this just from a little bit different angle, and that is that I understand that the libraries are going to go with a plan to use the mail service. Lynn, you probably know a lot more about this than I do, but it seems to me that if they're doing that, then I really question the advisability of the motion here, simply because I think we have to be cognizant that Mr. Ford's right-hand man is our representative, and I think that rather than being on a list of us two, it might be well of us to, or reflect well on us to stand back if in fact the libraries are going to try and muddle through this and pay the postage on this exchange.
Thank you. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I understand Mr. Ford's intentions. He and his party were elected to cut the deficit, and that's what they're attempting to do, and I give them credit for that. This is one particular area, though, that I have to question. The interlibrary loan service, we're maybe not talking huge dollars on the overall scheme of things. But pick a number, $20,000 for our Meaford Public Library to have to invest in Canada Post. Canada Post will love it. That's a hit. We do have a great many people who like to read books. A great many people who rely on this service. And we're not talking just 1 or 2 books here and there. We're talking maybe 15, 20 books a month, every month. And that, to make that difficult for them, that cuts in on their lifestyle. So I'm really hoping, Mr. Ford has just this morning backed off one of his cuts, his deficit cuts, and again, many municipalities applaud what he did this morning. Question why he made the announcement last Wednesday that, anyway, I don't want to get into that. But my bottom line is the interlibrary loan service in the Meaford Public Library is an important asset. And we don't have extra money in the budget. Here again, this is cutting a budget after our budget has been set for a number of months. Where are we going to come up with that money? We likely can, but it's going to be very, very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Anything further?
I just am loath to vote on this without some direction from our librarian who happens to be in the audience, and I think, is it possible to hear from her briefly on whether she feels we should be passing this motion at this time?
We can certainly ask. Welcome, Lynn. Are you on? Just push the button. There you go.
Push play. Thank you. I've been on the library listserv of the provincial CEOs for the last week, and most libraries, we probably might be able to swing the Canada Post situation next year. They don't want to do it this year if possible. I know Souls North, the interlibrary loan is starting up June 1st, but it's because they've always done it only through Canada Post. Therefore, it's not really much of a change for them, but they won't be asking for books from the Souls South because we're kind of in limbo right now. I know the libraries do want to, we want to start it up as soon as possible, but we really, a lot of libraries in the last week are saying that we want to hold off and see if the province will cover the postage. So that's what I've heard in the last week.
So we should pass this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Okay, I will call the question then. All in favor of this, endorsing this as we go ahead? And those against? And that is carried. Thank you, Lynn. Okay. Do we need a quick break before we move into? Yeah, 2 minutes. Okay, we're back in session at 5:10. And the first one on the agenda is FIM 2019-33, the 2019 tax rates and ratios, and bylaw 2019-48, a tax rate bylaw. I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Councillor Bartley, Deputy Mayor. And over to you, Mr. Chapman.
Through your worship, I think the first thing that I have to note, just a slight slip of my fat sausage fingers, we made a little bit of a mistake on the schedule to this bylaw. So there are two tax rates, the IU and the IX, so both industrial excess and vacant land. This would literally probably affect one or two properties if we don't make the change. The numbers that are in the bylaw for the education are 10965. They should be 106425. So it slightly changes the education rate percentage and then also the total rate for those two numbers. We'll update the actual bylaw schedule to reflect that, but I just wanted to make council aware that there was a slight mistake on the schedule, and that'll need to be updated.
Okay.
With regards to the report itself, I did a bit of work this year instead of just getting the bylaw passed to give some history on some of the assessment stuff, and tried to hit on some of the things that have been concerns of this council or the one in the past. Two things I'd like to touch on. First, the historical tax impacts on farmland. This was something that Councillor Vickers brought up during the training session. Table 3, which is on page 4 of the report, looks at the historical property tax distribution. So since 2014 versus 2019, the farmland portion has gone from 2.6% to 3.5%. So in reality, they've taken on a burden of less than 1% more of the total tax burden. The difference is when you break that percentage down as a burden of their share to begin with, that's why the farmers are seeing a greater impact. You know, their burden over that 5-year period is actually, like, they've seen their taxes go up by 30%. Overall, the take for the municipality is still less than $500,000 in total for the year for all farmland that we've got, which leads to other issues when we talk about infrastructure and bridges and so on and so forth, when we're getting less than $500,000 a year in total from all farmland. But in reality, you know, there is a discussion point, you know, in relation to Councillor Vickers' concerns that farmland is taking on a greater hit than other areas, and I would concur with that. If we went back and looked, you know, from 2011 to 2015, in particular in the multi-res and the properties that are kind of on water, those seasonal properties, they would have had the big hit then. But this is the problem that we've got with assessment. The other thing I want to note is in table 4, with regards to, that's on page 5 of the report, with regards to the average residential property tax impact. So council passed a budget that had a 2.7% increase in taxes. At the end of the day, the average residential property owner is going to see a total tax bill that is $33 less than last year, even with a 2.7% increase. The municipal portion is actually going to go down $22. And this is what I was trying to say during the training session in the past, that the rates are reflected of a revenue neutral position. So we've had a bunch of growth in this municipality because of good building numbers over the last couple of years. A lot of this new assessment finally came on stream in 2018, and because of that, even though the budget went up by 2.7%, we use assessment growth as new money. The existing taxpayer is paying less than they would have last year. Even though the budget's gone up by 2.7%, the overall assessment's gone up by more than that, which means that the average person, especially those that were not here prior to 2018, that were existing houses, will pay $22 less this year than they will the year before.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Darcy, for the good news. Now, to fly in the face of what you want to do each and every year, get the budget done early, if we had prolonged the budget process and knew some of these facts and figures at the time, I would have asked for more increase, simple as that.
Through your worship, I would love to respond to that. This is exactly why we don't do this. Council should be passing a budget based on what you believe to be the requirements to run this municipality for the next year, and what the priorities of the municipality need to be for that year. And should not be making a decision based on what 2.7% or 4.7% or 8.7% means at the end of the day when you blend the tax rate. We shouldn't say that we would have levied more had we known it didn't impact the property owner as much. Why would we have levied more? If we needed that money to begin with, we should have been levying it irrespective, but we didn't need the money because those were not priorities of council when we set the budget. We shouldn't wait until June to set a budget every year. I mean, the private sector would never wait halfway through their next fiscal year to actually know what their business is going to be, right? That's why, you know, we attempt at least the 3 out of the 4 years to make sure that the budget is set by December prior to the end of the fiscal year, so that when we come back after the Christmas break, we know what we're doing moving forward. And that's the way that it should be.
Councillor Kentner.
I'm probably,
Councillor
you know,
Kentner.
going to go deep in the weeds here, but I want to talk a bit about the vacancy rebate program. As I understand it, the real impact is inertia, because $5,000 or $6,000 on the total tax levy isn't big money. But over our term, that's $25,000 that we're going to let slide through the cracks. And when buildings remain vacant year after year, it stifles development, and it sends a message both inside and outside the community that we're stagnating. So to me, the reason that Owen Sound is moving on this is that they want to change their image from a city that is shrinking. And I think that we should be trendsetters on this one and not be waiting for other municipalities to take the lead. And if I may, just on the property tax assistance for low-income seniors and disabled persons, I think that if we were to crack down on this vacancy rebate program, we could have a little seed money to, in fact, start to provide an assistance program for those in need.
Through your worship, I would note that there are a lot of hoops to have to jump through for the vacancy rebate program. It has to be vacant for at least 6 months. You have to be actively and willingly marketing the property for tenants and not getting it. You then have to go through the process of actually applying for the rebate, and it's only for that tax year. So you would have to apply every year, year after year. I know the properties that everybody around the horseshoe is thinking about that are vacant, that are getting this. I cannot divulge information of a personal nature, but I can say that those properties that you are thinking of are not part of this vacancy program. Those property owners are not taking advantage of this because they are not willfully marketing the property for rent.
And they have to apply.
So they have to be doing that, and they have to apply, and they are not. So we could scrap this program. I'm fine with getting rid of it. It is not going to change what you all are thinking it's going to change.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just rebuttal to Darcy's answer to mine, I understand 100% what you said, and I agree with that. But there's no way I would come out in November, December, well, I need 4.7, and then Grey County come out, well, they need 5.3, and education comes out more, and then we didn't have assessment growth, and then end up with a 9%. Like I said earlier in my library thing, sometimes we're going to have to live with less. And at that point, I would say, well, maybe we can't do this and that. I just thought in the budget process, I think Mr. Councillor Bell is bringing it forward that it's going to be a shorter process. We should delay it so that we're fully educated at the time of budget deliberations. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
To further on, Mr. Kentner's comments about the vacancies, I do think it is a problem, and as a councillor, I would, I wish there was some way we could encourage people to quit having these delinquent buildings in our downtown core and even outside of our downtown core. I think it is an issue, and if changing this rate would help, then I might be in favor of, looking in that direction. I think it's a shame that we have buildings sitting there on valuable land that could be marketed, it could be developed if there's people willing to develop those properties. So, I agree with you, Ross, about these places, and I wish there was something we could do more about it. So, looks like Ross wants to say something, or Mr. Kentner, and
Yeah,
I would like to
Councillor
say
Kentner.
something after that, though, if I could, Madam Mayor.
We'll
Your
go
Worship.
around the horseshoe in just a second. Yeah.
I
Okay.
just add then, if I may, through your worship, that any $25,000 that we can lay our hands on is $25,000 that we can put towards bridges and roads. And I just think that it's foolish to, over our term, there'll be $25,000 just slip through the cracks. I'm not in favor of that.
We can bring that program forward when we bring forward the rebate program that is also discussed in the report, and council can make a decision at that stage.
At that time. Okay. Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak?
Thanks, Your Worship. And I think just in relation to Councillor Kentner's comments, to me, yeah, the vacancy rate is concerning for sure, but it's property standards. And I just thought I'd take that opportunity to ask our clerk where we are with that upcoming. I believe you're working on a new bylaw for that, because I think that's the method, that's the route to go after these delinquent building owners.
Through your worship, it is one of the many, many things on the CAOMI's to-do list, and it is coming as soon as we can manage it.
Stay tuned.
Just speaking to that, we do have a fairly robust property standards bylaw. We're looking to make it even stronger. So we do have existing tools that can be used in circumstances such as we used on the old Capitol Video movie theater. So we do have an existing property standards. I don't want to get perceived that we don't have any rules out there.
Okay, Councillor Vickers.
So to go back to the farmland taxation, I think this shows, and I realize that this has nothing to do with our municipality. The rates are set by the county, and I know we had our two representatives at the county level, and I would like to know did the county show you any numbers like this? Because I think it is, between farmland and managed forests, I know they're small areas, but it is a large impact on those areas. I think the county should take a long, hard look at these and maybe realize that we're taxing maybe unfairly. I will say unfairly, because obviously I'm one of those people, unfairly, that we're taking our biggest industry that we have in Grey County, and we're taking advantage of them and burdening them with higher costs than what that maybe should be. I made the comment last couple weeks ago about the worms not demanding many services, and we realize that farmland is taxed at a different rate, but all agriculture people that live in houses are being taxed at a residential rate. It's not like we just have our farmland rate and that we live underneath that. Our houses and our barns are taxed at a residential rate, so it's not like we're getting a free ride. And I'd like to point out that, maybe the comments that the Owen Sound Sun-Times put in the paper after the county vote that farmers got a break. And I'd like to make a point that maybe we didn't get a break, that we have maybe been asked to take more of a burden of the tax levy through the municipalities of not only Meaford, but the other municipalities. So I think this speaks volumes about what the OFA and what we've been talking about. So the next time that a person that owns agricultural land talks about having their taxes increased by a large amount, that we don't just slough them off and say, well, it's all part of the whole picture, that it's there's winners and losers, and it all kind of gets thrown in the pot, and you just happen to be a loser because you have to pay more. There was probably other agriculture people that would have to pay less. I think we can debunk that myth that there is, everybody in the agriculture and the managed forest section are paying more in taxes, and on a percentage, considerably more.
Thank you, Paul. Anything further then on this? Then I'll call the question. All in favor of accepting this report, and that is carried. Moving on to DES 2019-34, a zoning bylaw update. Mover and a seconder, please, to put this on the table. Councillor Bartley and Deputy Mayor. And back to you, Mr. Chapman, or Rob. There we go. Liz. And are we going to do the two of them together? Or are we going to, yes, speak to both of them?
Yes, we'll talk about them together, but we will have to have two
Have to.
resolutions for each of the bylaws.
Okay.
So I've provided council with a report outlining in great line-by-line detail the rationale and justification behind each of the proposed changes, both with respect to the cannabis rules that we're looking at putting in place, in addition to the general housekeeping and general amendments that are proposed. With respect to changes since the last time we were here on this issue at the public meeting, I would note that there were changes proposed just around the rules that we are recommending for personal medical production. I did have the opportunity to have quite an informative and educational discussion with a gentleman who sizes these grow operations for individuals at their homes, and he walked me through all of the nuances of how to grow cannabis for your personal medical purposes. And what he's recommended is that we take a look at perhaps using a scaled ratio for properties kind of above the 1 acre standpoint or size, so that we're not unduly restricting those that could require a larger outdoor grow area and could accommodate the setbacks where they're kind of larger size. So I have reflected that change, and what we've suggested is that we would set out permissions under section 4.33 cannabis of the bylaw to facilitate that on a property less than 1 acre in size, that there would be the permissions for an indoor grow of up to 300 square feet maximum, and outdoor grow of 300 square feet, which I think would capture the majority of circumstances based on kind of the average prescription that we would see locally, but across Canada as well, in terms of the statistics that are available on that. And that for those larger properties greater than 1 acre, that they could exceed that on a basis of 0.7% of the lot size for their total grow area, and where that is greater than 50 square meters, they would be applying the 300 meter setback from nearby residential lots or institutional uses, as would apply to the commercial growers as well. So I have included some rationale around that. Otherwise, the amendments are as set out in the draft that we heard comments on at the public meeting. And if there are questions that council has around any of those items, I'd be happy to attempt to answer those today.
Thank you, Liz. Any questions for Liz? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Liz. And not going on the cannabis zoning bylaws, but the one before 2019-34. There's a bunch of, in Schedule A, maps on different areas. And is there any sort of correspondence that goes back to what zone bylaw is being changed for them maps? I couldn't correlate one back and forth to each other. And you can give that to me later or something, but I didn't get to where one went back to the other, and I didn't know what zone bylaw was being changed at that area.
So I think that is perhaps a conversation that we would need to have aside. Each of the maps would be amended for a different reason. A number of them are relating to areas where we've perhaps mislabeled something, or the environmental protection zone was showing over here, but it was really supposed to be over here. So they're largely small technical changes for those amendments in the mapping. But if there are specific maps that you had questions about, we can certainly talk through the reasoning behind that. Just trying to keep them up to date, and no bylaw is perfect, so it does require amendment from time to time.
Okay. Councillor Kentner? No, you're good? Okay. Any further questions? Then I will call a question on receiving this report, and that is carried. And a mover and a seconder, please, to put the bylaw amendment on the table. Councillor Vickers and Deputy Mayor. Any comments or questions on that going forward? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? That is carried. CAO 2019-10, the Bridge Construction Marketing Plan. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Greenfield and Councillor Bell, thank you. And welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as part of the tender process for the Sykes Street Bridge reconstruction, Council directed staff to bring forward a marketing plan for the downtown businesses during construction. I think first it's important to recognize that Council has already made the decision to keep one lane of traffic flowing at all times during the project. Staff consulted with other communities who have had similar disruptive downtown projects, and we also consulted with individual business owners, the BIA, the Chamber of Commerce, and other staff members. One of the common marketing themes that emerged from consultation was simply communication. Other communities, and we will do the same, is accomplished through a dedicated website project page, social media updates, and paid social media advertising. The paid social media advertising can be absorbed by the existing economic development budget. Another common theme was creating activities in the downtown to encourage traffic. Currently, the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce are reviewing the potential business participation in a passport program to encourage repeat visits. Should the BIA decide to proceed with this initiative, they may require support from the municipality. The final component of the marketing plan is signage. Staff reviewed the possibility of creating and utilizing the across the street banner to encourage shopping downtown. However, the municipality has already committed this location to existing events. Staff are recommending that added signage along the route using the existing construction signs be funded from the economic development budget at a cost of $2,000. There were also concerns raised through the Chamber and the BIA regarding the sign bylaw and the placement of A-frame signage. It is recommended by staff to grant a temporary variance to the A-frame signage locations during the construction period. Another sign recommendation heard from multiple business owners was the importance of ensuring shoppers know where the public parking lots are located. The existing economic development budget is not able to fund this initiative, and staff has suggested that temporary signage could be added at a cost of $2,500. To sum up, staff are redirecting $3,500 from the existing economic development budget and staff time to complete this marketing plan. Should council wish to fund additional activities, events, or parking lot signage, there would be an additional cost that cannot be absorbed by the existing economic development budget. I'll take any questions if there is.
Thank you, Stephen. Is there any questions? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And I think everyone will recall when the bridge tender came to council and it was considerably under budget, $400,000 plus. And at that time, council requested that some monies be set aside for promotion without a dollar figure attached because we didn't know then what we needed. So I'm wondering now if we could revisit that amount of money and pull from that the money that's needed to fund these parking signs, because I think they are very important in our downtown. I've talked to those businesses too, and they would really like to see those signs.
Councillor Baker? Kentner, sorry.
I like the report. I just really believe the temporary directional parking signs are important.
Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Powell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Deputy Mayor, were you actually asking the treasurer for a report on those extra monies?
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I was kind of watching for a response, and if I don't get one, then I guess I need to make a notice of motion.
Sir, Your Worship, I didn't have a response, no.
No, if council wishes to add something to the proposed solutions in this report, then council can just add something to these proposed solutions by amending this motion, and money will be funded, and I imagine we would probably try and fund it from some of that spare cash from the budget.
Do you wish to do that, Deputy Mayor?
I would wish that to make that motion that we pull the $2,500 needed for the parking signs from the excess from the Sykes Street Bridge budget.
A seconder for that amendment? Councillor Kentner. Okay, we'll vote on the amendment first. All in favor of that amendment going forward? And that is carried. And then we'll vote on the proposed bridge construction marketing plan. All in favor of that as amended? And that is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. LPS 2019-16 Fire Prevention and Emergency Response Vehicle. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Bartley and Councillor Greenfield. And we got Matt. You
I'm
wish
going to
speak
bring
Matt?
John forward for this
There-
one.
There he is, in the back. Welcome, Chief.
It was a pleasure to be here. Even more so when I push the button.
When you push the button.
So, Your Worship, members of council, thank you for the opportunity to be before you this afternoon. The report speaks to a fire prevention emergency response vehicle purchase. If you recall, back in March of this year, we, council, received and adopted the master fire plan that spoke to the need for a fire prevention officer to comply with our legislative responsibilities. In March of this year, later in March of this year, the clerk brought forward a report that spoke to the recruitment of a full-time fire prevention officer. And in the report, it spoke to the probable need of a vehicle for that position to carry out the functions and the responsibilities required to meet our legislative responsibilities. So this report basically is brought before you to identify that we've found a vehicle that's slightly used, that has a price of approximately $40,000, which is also approximately $20,000 cheaper than if we were to go the traditional route of going out in the market and equipping it with the emergency lighting and so forth. So really it's an opportunity to see if we can get support for that purchase. It isn't part of this year's budget. It would be part of an advance, I guess, of the 2020 budget process. So happy to answer any questions if
Thank you for
have.
that, Chief. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, John. John, do we have to paint this truck and put all the bells and sirens and whistles on it?
It does not require any painting. It comes with all the emergency lighting. The only thing that we have to do is install a radio.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Chief. Can you tell us about the corporation where you're looking to get a hold of this vehicle from? Their background, these are pretty standard corporations that make a kit like this, and they're always...
So it's, the company is called Dependable Tank and Truck. It's a company that builds fire trucks, fire apparatus. And this unit was used by the part of the company that displays models at trade shows, what the emergency lighting kit can look like. And so it was used exclusively for travel around different trade shows. The mileage currently is around 6,500 kilometers, which is ridiculously low for a virtually brand new unit.
Anything else? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Happy spending. CUL 2019-05, the 2019 Canada Day event. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley, who are trading jobs there. And Matt, over to you.
Thanks. This is a hopefully very simple report. Because we are changing the location of some of the Canada Day festivities, we need a slightly larger licensed facility than has been there in the past. The pavilion has a continuing license, but we also will have a tent next to it, which also needs to be licensed. In order to do that, we have to get an SOP from the AGCO. And the AGCO have asked us to pass a resolution designating the event as municipally significant, even though it's a municipality's Canada Day celebration. So I'm asking council to pass that resolution so we can actually have a beer tent at the Canada Day.
And that is the resolution contained there in the recommendation as such. All right, questions? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And going back to Councillor Kentner's query at the first of the session today, can you tell me what the budget is in the budget right now, other than this, the money we're getting on the grant for Canada Day Meaford?
I cannot, I'm afraid. That's a level of detail I just don't have in my brain.
But there is money set aside in the budget for Canada Day celebrations over and above the money we've applied for and gotten?
There is. The budget is, I believe, the same as it has been every year in the past.
Yeah, the budget for the Canada Day celebrations here in the municipality are $17,000 with offset by the 46. I believe the fireworks that were ordered quite some time ago were around 7,000. Sorry, around 7,000. for the fireworks, and the rest are all the other activities such as the bands and elements.
Thank you. I truly believe that any sort of windfall gotten in should be maybe shared with the other two. I do apologize. I haven't attended a July 1st in Meaford. I've been at Bognor or Leith each and every year. Bognor is second to none, 600-700 people showing up, and I would like some of the money going towards them too. I know it doesn't really go with what we're asking for in this one, but I think we should share a little bit, whether it be $200 or $300. Thank you.
Through your worship, with the greatest respect, council has already set budgets for these events. Things have been procured and purchased. It will be happening in 5 weeks' time. Excuse me. To change that budget now would be very much the same as we've just said that we don't like the province doing about the library budget. If council wishes to do something different with potential grant funds for 2020, I would encourage them to do so.
Through your worship, more importantly, the grant application was specific as to what it was going to be used for, what the intention of the celebration was, that it is in urban Meaford. So if we started trying to parse out that amount of money to other things and then tried to report back that that's what we used it for, we'd probably be not in a good position.
Thank you for that. Okay, you can accept that answer. Good. All right. All in favor of this motion going forward, and that is carried. I have a motion to move into committee of the whole, please. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Greenfield, all in favor? And the first one off is our CAO 2019-09, our Blue Communities Project. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Vickers and Deputy Mayor. Okay, Rob, did you know who's going to?
I guess
You're
I
going
will.
to,
This has been a bit of a
Matt?
team effort because it goes across multiple of our departments. Staff are making a concerted effort to clean up some of the notices of motion directions that council's given, particularly in the last term of council. And back in April 2016, notices of motion came forward about reviewing the Blue Communities project. That, for various reasons, mostly revolving around staff changes, hasn't happened up until now. So we wanted to get this in front of council and make our recommendation that we do not pursue the Blue Communities designation at the moment. While the intent of it is valuable, and while staff are continuing to work towards most of these goals, what would need to happen in order to make them happen and get that designation immediately would be both time and cost prohibitive.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Comments, questions? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I remember when Councillor Calvert brought this forward and showing different little places around the country of Canada that had adopted this. But I'm going to state clearly that I would not support this. Like this report says that staff basically say do not do this. And I'm going to say why I believe we should do the staff's recommendation of not supporting Blue Communities. It was Dr. David Suzuki's program, and everybody here has probably watched programs from Dr. David Suzuki, but the punchline that got me was that this particular group wishes to go to the federal government and challenge the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's part of their mandate. They want to change that by lobbying against the feds. We're not in this position, in this chair, to want to be part of lobbying against the federal government of Canada. After we stood on a stage, raised our hands, and we said something about Queen Elizabeth II, all that means is that we actually adhere to organized government in this country. And to have some group that wishes us to be part of that, to challenge the feds, I will not be part of that. So the initiative that Councillor Calvert brought forward about clean water and clean air and clean things, every one of us around this horseshoe believe in, and we have rules and regulations in place. But that was one of the things that when I watched the program 3 times from Dr. David Suzuki, it was very clear that this is a lobbying group to the federal government of Canada. I would not want to participate in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, anything further from council? Then I will call the question. All in favor of accepting this report as presented, and that is carried. CAO 2019-11, the position creation for a Director of Infrastructure Services and 2 Human Resources Manager. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Greenfield. Rob, your report.
Thank you, Your Worship. That one I will take, yes. So part of the, currently have a resolution on the books from council that the creation of any new full-time positions must come back to council in a public session with the justification for that position. As the council and the public are very much aware, council has made a decision on the go forward with regard to the CAO position. Myself as CAO/Director of Development Services. What was removed from that position was the environmental services, so I no longer have oversight of the water, sewer, and waste management division directly as a director. In addition, realizing a number of council strategic priorities, we are looking at balancing the reporting throughout the senior management group of the municipality to ensure that we are able to continue delivering the services. I think we've made it very clear that a senior management or director level team of 3 is not sustainable to be able to deliver the services to the municipality and our residents going forward. Just as some background in the report, in addition, I should speak to the HR as a bit of background. I identified quite a history where we had a director of HR, then we went to a outside consultant to deliver an HR services, and then we hired an HR coordinator position with the understanding at that time that should we require manager type work, we would have a consultant do that. The fortunate thing was that we had a coordinator that had a greater level of experience and was able to deliver to us, the municipality, those management type responsibilities. And when our former CAO left and I got appointed the acting CAO, we did elevate that human resources coordinator to a human resources manager on an interim basis until we finalized the CAO position and reviewed the structure going forward. So we're at this point now where we'll be looking to formalize the HR manager position into a full-time position to replace the coordinator. It's not in addition to the coordinator. So just for clarification, it's not an additional position, it's to elevate that. In the report, I've identified some of the delegated responsibilities to the CAO position. A lot of it goes around structure, but having to come back to council on new positions, whether it's the creation of a new permanent position or to take a contract from a permanent position. So that's why I'm in front of council with this report going forward. I have provided as Appendix 1 the suggested structure, and basically it's to take the environmental services component from my reporting and the transportation services from Darcy's reporting, transportation and fleet, and move them into under a new Director of Infrastructure Services. This aligns with Council's priorities of bridges and roads so that a director can oversee the strategic direction and provide the necessary time to do that. In addition to, I think it's key is also to ensure the coordination between the water and wastewater and the roads above as we are impacted by some significant development that will be coming to this community, which will demand us to review our infrastructure going forward. So basically, the recommendation is to, from committee, is to allow us to proceed with the recruitment of a Director of Infrastructure, and also because our position with any contract position going to permanent, we do an open recruitment. So for the HR position, we will be doing an open recruitment for the HR manager position.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Questions? Comments? All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Moving right along. Excellent. DES 2018-55, the addendum report number 2 for a purchase request of the unopened road allowance between concession 4 and 5 within lots 28 and 30. Could I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bartley, thank you. And Liz, back to you.
Thank you very much. So we did hear from Mr. and Mrs. Doyle earlier this evening, speaking to this item on the agenda. What I heard in them speaking is frustration. And they're looking for a fair process in addressing their request. I think staff are after the same end. We would like to provide fair consideration as well. But I think what we've come to the realization, and as we've outlined within the report, is that we don't have a policy or structure kind of guiding us in decision making on these matters. So the recommendation of the report at this point in time is that Council defer a decision regarding the request until we can complete an unopened road allowance inventory and policy development project. And so the thought there is that staff would go through and do a comprehensive mapping exercise, essentially to understand what unopened road allowances do we have, where are they located, what condition are they in, are they traveled, are they farmed, are they treed, and try and understand and classify what types of allowances that we have, and in what circumstances do we feel that it's important to keep them for public use, and in what circumstances, from a broad brush perspective, would we consider sale in part or in full, or where would we consider gating? And I think the concern in dealing with them on a one-off basis, as has been the case, is that we can glean from Council's decision on past files kind of general values, but it's very difficult not having that conversation around what are the values, what is the role of these allowances, what are we trying to accomplish. Without that guidance, it becomes very difficult for us to make a recommendation that is fair and that does not create a situation of precedent where we're dealing with one situation this way and the same situation elsewhere different. And so I think really we're hoping that we can kind of put a little more understanding around the role of those allowances and how we should be dealing with them on a broad basis. I know that the Doyles have made a request to Council this evening for a decision, and certainly that is in Council's purview. If you feel you have the information to proceed with an option, that is at your discretion. But from a staff perspective, the recommendation is that we go through this process and have that conversation and make a decision and recommendation in light of kind of the bigger picture for these road allowances. So I'd be happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Liz.
They may arise.
Yeah, Councillor Vickers.
I would, or through your worship, I would agree with you, Liz, that we do need to look at a bigger picture, and it's better to look at this once and to get it done right, as opposed to trying to do one-offs all the time. So, if you don't mind, can I ask a couple of questions about the Doyle's presentations?
Certainly. Yep.
So, why are they being asked to pay the insurance on the road? That does seem odd to me. And I'll give you my other question here. Just why do we stop looking after the roadway also? Like, those are two things that stuck out from the presentation that I would like to see some answers from. Just for general information.
Certainly, thank you very much. So I may have to call on Darcy to help me with this a little bit. In terms of the insurance requirement, so generally when we are looking at kind of, I'll back up. Under kind of common law, adjacent property owners have a common law right of access over an unopened road allowance that is adjacent to them. Unopened road allowances are a public right-of-way, essentially, but that does not guarantee an adjacent landowner any permission to make alterations or have exclusive use over that road allowance. So it's kind of an as-is kind of scenario that you can use it in the state that it's in. If we would be establishing by agreement some exclusive use permissions or authorization to that landowner to make alterations on that allowance, there is potential liability that arises by virtue of the fact that they're doing work on the allowance, and if somebody else exercising their common law right of access were to hurt themselves or run into an issue as a result of that, the municipality would be jointly liable in that case.
Could you say that all over again?
Sure. Yeah. Slower.
Well, no, not slower, but just, I'm
Okay,
trying to take
maybe
it in.
Darcy can say it in a different way. That
So
might help.
break it down really simple and use a real example. If the road allowance is unopened and stays as it is, we have a certain amount of liability. If we allow anybody to make improvements to that road allowance and say clear some trees, put some gravel down, so on and so forth, if we don't have insurance binding them, another person is going to go down there believing that the road is in a better state of condition than it is and that the municipality is actually doing some form of maintenance on it, then goes down, blows a tire, takes out the bottom of their engine, whatever it might be. They're going to come back to the municipality saying that we're liable for the damages to their vehicle. Or if somebody goes just on a bicycle and hurts themselves. That's the whole point of the insurance, is to protect us, because what we're saying is we just want the road allowance left in the state that it's in, so that people use common sense, recognizing this isn't an open road, I shouldn't be traveling down it. So if they want to make improvements, we need insurance to protect the taxpayer.
So and I guess it's a little bit of a question, so do the Doyles have to get onto their house, get to their house, they have to go up to an open road allowance?
Yes. Yeah, and it's quite a substantial trek. I went up there on a wet day. It was a little mucky, and certainly I wouldn't have gone beyond the driveway. It's a little mucky. I guess my thought is we need to try and find a way to balance kind of historic use, reasonable maintenance with the liability consideration. And my thought is that appropriate use and use that creates liability, there's probably some overlap there, and it's really kind of the point of this exercise would be to come to an understanding of what level of liability are we comfortable with to facilitate the types of uses that we feel are reasonable for these allowances. So if somebody is putting down grass seed or clearing out an existing ditch, or moving a fallen tree so that they can still exercise their right of access, maybe we don't care. Maybe that's the appropriate level of interference, and we're willing to accept that liability. At some point, though, we cross that line.
And I think just to add, because some members may not be totally aware of this, we're talking about somewhat of a historical problem here. If somebody now came to the municipality and asked to sever some land to create a lot that didn't have access on an open road allowance, we would not allow them to do that. But historically, the predecessor municipalities did permit that. And to be perfectly honest, one of the things that we're talking about here when we talk about sort of doing a bit of a road allowance survey is that we don't necessarily know quite how many of these there are out there that have had 100-year access down one of our unopened road allowances, but need it, but we don't really know where they are or how they're doing it, or whether that maintenance is or is not being done. And so I think that's why we need to do an assessment of where the problems are.
Thank you. Councillor Kentner.
Well, when I read the staff report, I just put a big check beside it because I thought, boy, this is sure a well-reasoned report. And then we heard from the ratepayers tonight, and my God, they're in double jeopardy, and they have not been treated fairly. And it's kind of appalling as a councillor to hear the way they have been treated in this. So I guess my question is, how long will it take us to decide what kind of an answer we can give them?
So I have made the request to staff to start preparing the mapping so that we can go through and do that inventory. As I outlined within the report, my intention would be to try and have this wrapped up before we get into a winter maintenance scenario this year. That would be what I would endeavor to accomplish. Certainly, I think that around the staff table, our thought is, in the interim, we need to be in a position to facilitate kind of status quo access. And I don't want the Doyles to have concern that that's something we're trying to pull away through this deferral. The intention is just to make sure that if we are making a decision that has lasting long-term impacts, that we're doing it in the right way. And they have been incredibly patient and so pleasant to deal with, and I'm thankful for that through the process.
Yeah, Councillor Kentner.
Through your worship, I think that they've dealt with the municipality in good faith, And I'm not sure that, like, I don't understand their point that after 2 years of negotiations, why don't we apply our existing rule and then go on and do this exhaustive investigation, which sounds to me is going to take at least another year.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Liz and I in particular, but some of our staff team are very committed to moving this through, because in reality, these cases are taking up huge amounts of Liz's time, some of our team in Transportation's time, some of my time, and that's not an effective and efficient way of doing things. So, as Liz says, we're already looking at the mapping to try and determine where these properties are. My intent would be that we come back to Council for a broad-based theoretical discussion, not a proposed policy, before your summer break, with the idea that then we will be able to have a policy coming to you in September or October. So there is no intention that this would take another year, that we really do want to move this forward and keep going. I think we're all on the same page that the Doyle situation does need to be resolved, and we need to do so fairly. And should Council wish to do something now, we can do that. But as we've said in the report, we're a little uncomfortable about making a decision based on what we've made some assumptions on Council's past history, when we have treated these road allowances very differently at different times because of all sorts of unusual circumstances. And we're very keen that we have a sort of a standard template to use.
Could we add a date to defer to in this resolution? Would that bring some comfort in the overall resolution? By September, by October, whatever.
I think if that's Council's wish, we could do that. I would suggest that I wouldn't want to say that we could do it before October. I think September may just be pushing our luck just a little bit. But if we could do it in October, then potentially Council could then approve either sales or maintenance or agreements with the Doyles in November before we really hit winter maintenance.
Okay. Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just before maybe Council might entertain that, I want to thank you very much, Liz, for working with the Doyles, and appreciate the Doyles' patience. But at the same time, every time these unopened road allowance questions come up, we have impact from neighbors, and we have impact from those who say they use it or they don't use it. In this specific case, the Doyles themselves have engaged the local farmers who have or need to have access to this area. They have worked very hard, and they've worked studiously to have conversation with them. We have heard no comments from other people who say, as an example, I often take my horse for a ride down that side road and keep it open because we already own it. We had cases like that in the council previous, and they said we toboggan, we do this and that. The Doyles, where they are, have had none of that, and they're prepared to have one farmer have access down that road. Historically, just another moment, Madam Mayor, without dating myself of how old I am, when it was the Sydenham Township, back in the days when I went to public school, the family that lived up there, the kids walked down from the house down to the bottom, and the bus picked them up. Sydenham Township graded that road, okay? This I know. So, what we've had is a transition over a period of decades where something has been let go and not done, and we're dealing with that on our bridges. It just got let go. There was no money in budgets, and for reasons things got cut. Tonight, the Doyles would like to know that, in my mind, they could, if they gate the end of that, that's the same situation as what we had in the wintertime with the parks use. Gates across mean it's closed, and people are out, and there will be no public outcry from people wanting to go down there, because nobody goes down there now. This family gets to their house down that road, and I don't have a problem tonight letting the Doyles take this road, have an agreement with the farmer, and the other farmer that was mentioned doesn't need that, let me think of the direction, that would be the southerly direction getting down that hill. They've got all kinds of acres on the other side, and they farm that property. I'm well acquainted with their property, and I hear your plight, and I think tonight we can let the Doyles move forward on this, and still in the future have this situation of unopened roads looked at.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if council wishes to do something, we absolutely can. I will say that, and the report references it, but and as Mr. Doyle said, we perhaps could have been a little more specific. Our concern with the concept of gating a road allowance is that that's a precedent that other people might then want to come and have. We had a case last year where somebody was looking at buying a portion of a road allowance because they didn't want the snowmobiles to be going along the front of their house. So if we are to gate one road allowance, then we are likely to get more requests from, say, that person that we declined to sell a road allowance to last year, asking to gate that road allowance. And there's just a bit of a pathway there that I'm concerned about without us having that fundamental conversation of, do we care the most about public access? Do we care the most about liability? Or do we care the most about just trying to sell as many of these as possible?
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Ms. Buckton. On the subject of gates, we have gated roads before. For many years up on the St. Vincent Blue Mountains town line, we had a road allowance gated because a gentleman was raising buffalo, and he thought it'd be advised to have a gate on the road allowance. I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but at one time, just south of us here on Sideroad 13, Jimmy Clark's side road, as is better known, there was a gate put up so people could not go down over the hill. As far as I know, it's still there. So we do gates, and for better or worse. But so I'm not sure why the gate couldn't be a potential here in this case.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Liz. I was part of the other road allowances, accepting or selling or whatnot, and I don't have any issue taking each one individually, talking about it. There was neighbors that didn't want to sell that were touching that road allowance, so we didn't sell it. We have nobody objecting to this road allowance. I have zero issues selling part of the road allowance to the Doyles, and I'd like to do it tonight.
Anything further? Are you making a motion to that effect?
I would bring a motion forward in the short form that we do allow and sell the first portion of the road allowance to the Doyles, as long as they have it in place, the Wilsons can use it, and that the third farmer signs off on it.
Happy to second it.
Okay. This is a completely different motion here. Would we have to?
That's okay.
define on this one? Can
Chris
you,
and I are
can you
just
work
typing
that
away
out?
on our screens to see if we can come up with, or rather Chris is trying to come up with some words, and I'm hoping to read them fairly quickly. So in effect, Councillor Bartley, Councillor Kentner, your motion would say something along the lines of the Committee of the Whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford direct staff to 1, facilitate the sale of the road allowance between concession 4 and 5 within lots 28 to 30, pending approval of the abutting landowner and right of access for said landowners, and 2, complete an unopened road allowance inventory and policy development project for Council's consideration.
I think it's important to have that last in there as well. That's well chosen words. Steve, Councillor Vickers.
Have we talked about a dollar amount?
So the discussions that we've had previously were with the prior $2,500 an acre that we've been using. We still have not received the results of the market study that we are pursuing. So certainly that's for consideration. I think in this case, regardless of that study, I think there is some consideration to the fact that there has been some improvements already made on the allowance. I certainly am open if you think there's a different number that is more appropriate, but the 2,500 is what has been discussed up until this point. Per acre. Not offhand. No.
I believe, Madam Mayor, Liz had a correction to Chris and my motion with a bit of a technicality.
I just wanted to note that with respect to sale of road allowances, we do look for a resolution of best use. So just having some wording in there that council declares the best use to be transferred. And then the further clarification just with respect to having the other farmers sign off. I just wondered, are you referring to the Davenports at the south that they don't also require a right-of-way? Is that correct? Okay.
Councillor Figures.
But the Wilsons do, they will, like, is that possible? It is possible.
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure legally it was possible, right? Right, so. The only problem we get into this is the other half. We're only selling half of it, eh? So what, do you force the Davenports to buy the other half, or can they say, nope, we aren't having any part of it, so then you have an unopened half road allowance? So these are just some of the little problems that, as much as I feel for the Doyles, I just hate to see us get into a bad spot.
Yeah, through your worship, that was one of the challenges as we went down this, that the original request was from the Doyles to purchase just their section. We didn't want to sell just a portion, so there was expressed interest, the Davenports expressed an interest in purchasing their section, but the Wilsons didn't, which would have left a little orphan piece in the middle of nowhere of a road allowance that we would be left with. So I think by just purchasing the north, we still have the road allowance connecting to the south to an open and maintained road. So it's I guess it's not the ideal situation, but it's not, it's something we can live with for sure. Yeah.
If I can speak to that as well, I know, so for the Wilsons, it was a matter of just capital at this point in time. I think over the balance of time, they had expressed that they would generally have an interest, but it was around financing. Further, with respect to the lots to the south, Mr. Davenport did express an interest in acquiring the pieces abutting his parcels, and there are two separately conveyable pieces there. However, he declined to provide any kind of right-of-way over those lands, and so that would, I think, preclude that sale because a right-of-way is a necessary component of the Wilsons farm operation due to the slope of the hill. They have expressed some safety concerns in terms of only having access from the north. So I think over the balance of time, there would be some interest by the Davenports to pursue that, but I think we would need to resolve the matter of reasonable farm access for the Wilsons to the south.
Through your worship, so do the Wilsons have to go past the Doyles to get access, or do they have to go past the Davenport section?
Yes.
Both.
So,
but
yes.
the Davenport section isn't as good as the Doyle half.
The Doyles, to reach the Wilsons property, you go up a very steep hill, and then the Wilsons portion is fairly flat, abutting them, and then you go up an additional hill to get up to 27 Sideroad. So, you know, it's a gradual slope up from the Wilsons, but when they have a full tractor to come down the Doyles Hill to the north, what they've said is they've had several instances where the trailer pushed the tractor, so it's very steep. So their preference, my understanding, is to access the property from the north, from the Doyle side, and exit to the south, and they have farm holdings to the south as well. So I think it's a matter of partially safety, partially convenience for their consideration.
So hearing that information in my own mind, it does make it a little bit trickier. Like I can appreciate everybody's problems and issues, but I'm not too sure the Wilsons would then have to get permission to go both ways, right? To go through the Doyles and then to exit through the Davenport. So it gets a little muddier, I think, from the way I'm seeing it. I don't know whether I'm seeing it right. The way I see it, it looks a little muddier to me.
Okay. We have an amendment proposed, moved and seconded. Mr. Clerk, can you?
I can read that again.
Reread
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. So the amendment proposed by Councillor Bartley, seconded by Councillor Kentner, is to amend the motion by replacing the text with the following: that Committee of the Whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford declare the best use of the subject unopened road allowance to be lot addition to the abutting landowner. 2, direct staff to facilitate the sale of the road allowance between concession 4 and 5 within lots 28 to 30, pending approval of the abutting landowner and the development of a right of access for said landowners. And 3, direct staff to complete an unopened road allowance inventory and policy development project. And I will ask Council's slight indulgence that if you were to pass this amendment, that we may be allowed to tweak a word or two in there before Council makes a final decision to make sure we have the legalities correct.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right, I'll call the question on the amendment. Are we all ready for that? On the amendment, I'll call the question. All in favor of that amendment? And those against? And that is carried. So now we'll go back to the original motion, and you'll read that again in its entirety,
So
please.
having passed that amendment, the original motion is the lines that I've just read out, and I can read that again if Council wishes. But
All right, I think we're okay. We're understanding. I'll call a question on.
okay. So no, that's absolutely fine. Through your worship, the motion is now that committee of the whole recommend Council of the Municipality of Meaford declare the best use to be lot addition to the abutting landowner, direct staff to facilitate the sale, and direct staff to complete the road allowance inventory and policy development.
Okay. All in favor of that amended motion, and those against? Okay, that is carried. Thanks very much, Liz, and thanks to the Doyles for your patience. DES 2019-31, 15 Boucher Street, PAT decisions. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on? Deputy Mayor and Councillor Kentner. And Rob,
Thank you,
going
Worship.
to you.
So, as per the report, and as highlighted by Mr. Altman earlier, the LPAT has reviewed the situation and has sent it back to Council to consider making another decision on the matter. We did reach out to our solicitor and how does this proceed? Because again, this LPAT stuff is all new to all of us and we're all learning our way. The other variable is there's potential legislation coming forward that's been tabled to change the game for the LPAT, and which could affect it as well. So anyways, just the three options for Council. And Council is not, as per this report, you're not making any decision on it today. What was clear from our solicitor was that if Council is to reconsider the bylaw or to amend the bylaw or pass it or even potentially refuse it, the first thing we have to do is go through the public process again. So we have to give 20 days notice. There'll be a public meeting. Mr. Altman can come and speak to the merits of the bylaw, speak basically everything that he spoke of today, and was encouraged to do it for the public meeting. That's the vessel to which we would gain public input, and then Council can make their decision after that point on whether you want to consider it or not, which you have 90 days to do from the date of the decision. The three options, so if Council fails to make any decision, so you get it, you don't do anything within 90 days, it goes back to the LPAT, and the LPAT may amend the bylaw themselves. They may just say, we'll amend it, irrespective of Council's decision, or they may direct Council, so you will be ordered to pass the bylaw. The other option, if Council goes through this public process and then refuses to make the bylaw amendment again, then they will go back to the tribunal, and they may amend the bylaw or again direct Council to amend the bylaw if the tribunal determines that the existing bylaw is, and then lists all the things that they've already in their current decision have said that it complies with. So to me, and the last thing is if Council makes a new decision on a bylaw. Now that could be a decision that provides an opportunity for, as Mr. Altman had suggested, dialogue between the Getz, Mr. Getz and the municipality and the Altmans on maybe there's tweaks that we can make to the bylaw before it comes to Council. That's the opportunity where we can have that dialogue and discussion in doing so. But by not passing the resolution, at least getting to the public meeting or doing to that, we've halted any discussion and it's going back to the tribunal right away. So I hope that provides some sort of background to Council on what you're being asked for at this point today only.
Anything further on that? Councillor Kentner.
Could you just, through your worship, could you just clarify the only way to really have any input to, or like on possible changes, is to go the public meeting route?
You're correct. The LPAT has suggested that the board revisit the bylaw. That can be the existing bylaw, it can be a modified bylaw that comes out of discussions with the Altmans and the Gets on maybe there's a resolution or something like that. I'm not saying that it'll be sex, but it provides us that opportunity to have that discussion. And if there's an agreement, then council could pass a bylaw that's in agreement with all the parties, and it could go on, or it could be approved and not appealed, then it's in effect and doesn't have to go back to the LPAT.
Okay.
That, it seems to me, would be a good process, because I agree with Mr. Altman that none of the issues that the neighbors are addressed by the way the LPAC works.
This is just to commence the process then. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor and fellow councillors. I'm going to be careful of what I say because we were in closed session. So we have been given advice. We have been given advice. And yet we, as council members, back when this issue came up, wish to represent the views of those around. And one of the things that comes out is the language. And the language, one of the words that I picked up on was the word of conformity. Does this conform? Is this something that, when I took that word, what's it going to look like? How's it going to be? How's it going to fit? When you start talking about the bylaws, does it conform to the province, to Grey County, and to the municipality of Meaford? Does it conform to those things? Got nothing to do with the way the place is going to look, what it's going to be like, where the garbage container is going to be, even if they have one. That's got nothing to do with that word. What it has to do with is the province, Grey County, the municipality of Meaford. And so we were in a closed session, and we were given by our lawyer advice, and in the recommendation, what we were told on the decision that we made, still wishing to represent the wishes of ratepayers, and it comes down to that one word, does it conform? And so the builder has challenged this decision. The builder is saying, and through that hearing, it conforms with the province, Grey County, and municipality. And so we were asked to reconsider. And am I gone far enough on what I am saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm thoroughly confused. It started out a boutique hotel. It is not a boutique hotel. I've never seen drawings on what this thing is looking like. That's the reason I turned it down. Something would be nice there, but I need the truth. That's what I want, is the truth. What is it? Is it a bed and breakfast? What is it? We don't know what it is. He won't tell us what it's really going to be, and he's got no drawings. So that's the reason I stopped it at that time. I agree that we should have something there instead of the empty lot. So what direction are we to take that the Altmans can negotiate with the owner and come up with a better solution? What do we need to pass to have that done?
This process.
Which process?
The recommendation that we've got in front of us now.
The recommendation to go to a public meeting, which starts the process for council to reconsider, to have discussions about the bylaw itself. Council at the end of the day can hold a public meeting and then refuse the bylaw again. You're not obligated to pass the bylaw by starting this public meeting process.
Okay. Is that clear? Everyone okay with this? I'll call a question. All in favor then of this motion as presented, and that is carried. Moving on to FIM 2019-31, an award of tender to...
Sorry, Madam Mayor, could we have a motion to extend? We've been here rather a while.
I didn't want to do that. All right. Thank you. Reluctantly. I have a motion to extend, please. Councillor Bell, Councillor Bartley. All in favor of extension? for 20 minutes. All right, let's put FIM 2019-31, the award of tender to the concession A road rehabilitation on the table, please. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley. Over to you, Mr. Chapman.
Yes, Your Worship. First, I just want to clarify to Council that as staff, we understand that Council is desirous potentially of asphalting this road versus surface treatment. Fully understand that. The recommendation that was made, passed by Council, was to set aside money to potentially have the funding available to asphalt the road. You did not direct staff immediately and indefinitely to provide asphalt on the road. So because of that, we have gone through the standard process that we always do with these reports to provide justification as to staff's professional opinion on what we should be doing next. We received tenders for the work. The work, as was identified in the budget, which is surface treatment, fits within the budget. The low price fits within the budget. If we went to an asphalt surface, it's about $93,000 more expensive than surface treatment. The reason that we as staff are recommending to stay with surface treatment is not because of the life cycle costs. In fact, the life cycle cost analysis shows that asphalt versus surface treatment is within $500 of each other over a 20-year span. So dollar for dollar, it's virtually the same. So on Sideroad, which didn't pass earlier tonight, but was going the way of asphalt, it made sense because of long-term costs. The difference between this road and Sideroad, and the difference in the recommendation, is simply based on the current level of service that we have within the municipality, which is based on traffic count. This really is, from staff's perspective, the long-term implication. Should we go with asphalt on this road, as far as staff is concerned, what we are in essence doing is you will be directing staff to get rid of surface treatment in the municipality. What we will be saying is that any road that has an average daily traffic count of 100 cars or more should be asphalted. The long-term costing, the financial implications show that it is virtually the same, asphalt versus surface treatment over a 20-year period. The implication to this is that we cannot afford to upgrade all of our roads from surface treatment to asphalt because there's just the cash flow is not there. So if we do it for this road, how do we justify in the future not doing it for the next road when the costing is similar and the traffic count is low? Which is why as staff we are still recommending that the road should be reconstructed, but it should be surface treated, because our current process is for roads that have a traffic count less than 400, surface treatment is sustainable. And we use typically only asphalt roads if it's more than 400 cars a day. So that's why the recommendation is what it is. Beyond that, I will leave it to council to debate.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chapman. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Darcy. You make 100% sense, and I agree with you. The road I live on is tar and chip. I never want it paved. You can tar and chip it if you want. I understand that 100%, and we're not setting a precedent. This road here is paved up until this section, and it's paved after that section. And henceforth, that's why I think it should be paved in the middle of it. If it was tar and chip at either end of it, I would agree with you 100%. I'd like to see this one section paved only for the reason to it and from it is paved. Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's no doubt about it. I think the council and staff are all of the opinion that this road has to be repaired, and we've already started the repair by the pulverizing. The only question to me is, are we going to end up with a double surface treatment, or are we going to end up with an asphalt paved road? So, with your permission, Your Worship, I do have an amendment that I'd like to bring forward. And it says, and I've had a bit of help with this too. Approve the award of tender FIM TS-2019-08 Concession A, road rehabilitation, including the addition of the provisional item for the enhancement of the existing surface treatment road surface to a hot mix asphalt surface to Arneal Contracting, known as Steele and Arneal Construction, for a total of $447,715.66, including the municipality's non-refundable allocation of HST. And authorize the Treasurer/Director of Financial Services and Infrastructure to allocate $87,315.66 from the Small and Rural Municipal Resources Grant to improve service delivery and efficiencies to fund the budget shortfall resulting from the enhancement of the existing surface treatment road surface to a hot mix asphalt, and authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into the necessary agreement. And if I just may add, Your Worship, and Councillor Bartley has started on this. We're talking about traffic counts. Okay, and traffic counts are a factor. I'm not looking at this as 2.3 kilometers from Sideroad 18 to the Birches subdivision. I'm looking at a strip of asphalt all the way from the north boundary of Owen Sound to the north end of the Birches subdivision. Basically the Bayshore Road. If you want to talk traffic count, hundreds of vehicles on that road. That's how I'm looking at this. This would be the completion of a huge asset to our municipality, a beautiful black strip of asphalt all up our west coast. Something to be proud of. For under $90,000 of provincial funding, not local taxpayer funding, let's do it. Thank you.
There's a motion on the floor to amend. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Kentner.
Second it, thank you.
All right. Any further discussion on the amendment? Councillor Kentner.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with the staff position because of the fact that it's asphalt at both ends, but also I'm just not prepared to rely on a traffic count that ignores weekends on a tourist road. Doesn't make any sense. It's not scientific.
Not a tourist road. Councillor Vickers.
And I guess I'll talk against Harley's motion and talk for the staff motion because, you know what, it is a dead end road, and we're putting $90,000 extra into it, and you know I look at that saying we're putting the double tar and chip on. It's smooth, it's flat, there's no dust. I just can't justify whether the money comes from the province or from our own tax levy to spend the extra $90,000. I think it's an ask by the local people that is unreasonable and that it is more than what can be justified, being that it's a dead end road. Concession 4 is a through road. There is a lot more traffic going to and from. Obviously, there'll be a higher traffic count towards the start of it. As you get towards the end of it, you get to the very end of it, there may only be one car. You know, the person gets home that night, or two cars. The person gets home, they go back to work, sort of thing. So I just feel that it's a lot of money. We have a lot of other projects that we would like to see get completed, and bridges and our gravel roads. Has anybody traveled the road south of the Dairy Line heading up towards the Strathaven Church? Like, if you want to talk about a rough road, there is a rough road, and those people just want a little bit of gravel, alone to, you know, to put asphalt onto it. So that's the reason why I'm voting
in favor of the staff report.
Favor of the staff motion against Harley's motion, Mr. Greenfield's motion. Sorry, but I'm not formal enough.
Doing all right, doing all right. Deputy Mayor,
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will be voting in support of Councillor Greenfield's motion because I think the other thing we have to consider on this stretch of hopefully pavement is the economic impacts that will come as a result of having that full length of paved road and the folks that will be encouraged to purchase those lots out there and build beautiful homes on the waterfront. So I think it's important that we consider more than a daily traffic count when we make these decisions. And so for that reason, I will be voting in favor.
Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I also will be supporting Councillor Greenfield on this, and I want to do two quick comments. One, this council has not, by doing this, directed staff in the future to do away with double surface treatment. We want all options to be able to repair our roads and look after our roads, and so by saying to pave this, we're not directing staff to do away with double surface treatment. There will be areas where we definitely need to do that. The other point is, we have got money to do something with this in a special deal. Council made a decision that we would like to pave that road out there. Council can make a decision, and when we make the decision to put a point on the sword, staff's job is to implement council's decision. And we have said this about paving that concession out there, and I'm in favor of paving that concession because council says we'd like to pave it. Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. If I may comment on Councillor Vickers' comment, and certainly I truly appreciate Paul's comments, all of his comments. He's going to be a real good municipal councillor. There's no doubt about that. But on the subject of dead-end roads, if you go up to our boundary with Grey Highlands, and you come down the 7th line, and you go north, and you go across the highway, a continuous paved road, and where does it end up? At the gate at the army base, a dead end. Not the first one, not the only one.
Okay. Anything further on the amendment? I will call a question on the amendment as presented. We can all read it up there. All in favor of this as amended? And those against? And that is carried. And then moving the into the formal amended version.
So the amended version is now up on the screen
Is
as well.
now
It's
up
just
on
taken
screen.
that top bit off.
And we still have Bartley and Bell on that. And I'll call a question. All in favor of the amended motion? And that is carried. Okay, FIM 2019-32, the Strategic Asset Management Policy. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Bartley, Deputy Mayor. Okay, back to you.
Through Your Worship,
Chair.
this is pretty much Brady's job, so there's no point in me trying to steal his thunder, so I'm going to let
There
him
he
talk
is,
to you about
right
it.
behind
So
you.
we'll have him up at the podium.
All right, good
Welcome,
afternoon,
Brady.
or potentially good evening. Madam Mayor, I am here today to present the draft of the municipality's draft or strategic asset management policy. This draft policy will form the foundation of the municipality's asset management program by confirming the roles and responsibilities of council, staff, required resources, connection to other municipalities' programs, and what the expected outcomes of the program are. This is something that I started to work on immediately after taking my role in 2015. However, when we received the draft legislation from the province, we decided to put the brakes on it so that we didn't bring a policy that had not been kind of vetted or prescribed by the province. So it's not something that we've been ignoring. It's just something that we've been waiting to make sure that we are meeting every requirement of the legislation. So this policy has been drafted with the 12 mandated principles of Ontario Regulation 588-17. As well as some enhancements on the wording to make it sound a little less legislated and a little more maybe Meafordized. And that we worked with the MFOA, Municipal Finance Association of Ontario, their Strategic Asset Management Policy Toolkit, as well as some consultation sessions with Asset Management Ontario, a group of asset managers across the province, to try and implement some best practices into this as well. The key point is that this 12 mandated principles will be in every strategic asset management policy across Ontario. Where I think we are going to be a little bit different and kind of ties into Council's strategic objectives is the addition of 3 guiding principles as well. So the first one is the customer focused. The municipality will have clearly defined levels of service and apply asset management practices to maintain the confidence of stakeholders in how municipal assets are managed and in compliance with legislation and regulations. Service focused is the next one. The municipality will consider all assets in service context and take into account the interrelationships as opposed to optimizing individual assets in isolation. The next one would be risk-based. The municipality will manage the asset risk associated with attaining the agreed upon levels of service by focusing resources, expenditures, and priorities based upon risk assessments and the corresponding cost benefit, recognizing that public safety is the priority, as well as value-based affordable. The municipality will choose practices, interventions, and operations that aim at reducing the life cycle cost of ownership while satisfying agreed upon levels of service. Decisions will be based on balancing mandated principles, service levels, risks, and costs, and will be supported through asset management, work management, and GIS software and applications to track the performance of these assets and the services that are delivered by the municipality. So what does this really mean for your role as council, our role as staff, from the kind of executive management and user department level, and how does the public play into this? Basically, what the council's role will be to approve the policy and its update every 5 years, and then help us establish those levels of service. A little bit further down below, you'll see how stakeholders can become involved in this, but it's really council will help us establish those levels of service, and that's an exercise that we'll probably start late in 2019, early 2020, once we really have a strong understanding of our core assets. We know we have a great understanding of our road assets, our bridge assets, and currently we're working away very, very hard on our water, wastewater, and stormwater assets in order to meet the 2021 guideline or deadline. These assets were based on the 2009 PSAP database that was originally created for those TCA requirements. However, we are doing a lot of field verification and desktop review of those because we found out that we actually have sections of pipe that aren't there, or are there, or we missed some manholes, we've missed some valves. We're really verifying what we own so that we don't plan to replace a pipe that may or may not exist. The roads, the bridges, they're a little bit easier to see because they're up at ground level. We can actually see them. A lot of this underground stuff is a little bit difficult and requires us going through a lot of drawings, CCTV inspections, and putting a lot of effort into that as well. As staff, we will develop the asset management plan and policy in accordance with our legislative requirements, the 12 mandated requirements of the legislation, as well as incorporating the levels of service that have been endorsed by council. We will work to make sure that those are interconnected, so when we're looking at a road project, we're looking at a water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure underneath that as well, and then we'll work to implement those strategies as prescribed. That will range right from the executive management right down to the user departments, who are the ones that are actually delivering those services to the residents using the assets that we provide our staff with. And then the next one would be the residents and stakeholders. The role of the residents and stakeholders with respect to the strategic asset management policy is to provide feedback related to the levels of service, service experience, and service expectations to both staff and council as appropriate, and notify the municipality via appropriate means when service deficiencies or failures are observed. And that will lead into future kind of customer service and work order software so that we can adequately track that, so that we can bring statistical information back to council so that we have the statistics and the level of service to see how our programs are doing and whether we're allocating the proper funding to those as well. And then finally moving on to the implications, just because this is a legislative requirement, we have to have this policy in place and on our website by July 1st, 2019. The failure to adopt this strategy will result in the municipality being non-compliant with this legislation and will most likely lead to automatic rejection of the municipality's application for grant funding. So I think that's that, and I can answer questions.
A dire note to end the presentation. Comments, questions? Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Much better said than Darcy would have. Thank you.
Good report. Anything further? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, Brady. Well done. LPS 2019-15, naloxone program. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Put that on the table. Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bartley. And who's going to take that?
I am, Madam Mayor. As Council may well have heard in the news over the last year or so about increases in drug-related incidents across the province, particularly with regard to fentanyl and carfentanil. Naloxone is a drug that can be get free from charge from any pharmacy for any member of the public, and increasing numbers of paramedics and fire services are carrying that drug to use as an antidote when somebody is suffering from an overdose. Our fire chief here at Meaford and District Fire Department has done some analysis on some of the incidents we've had over the last year or so in Meaford, and has noted a rather disturbing increase in the number of overdose calls that we've responded to. Similarly, the Inter-Township Fire Department Board passed a resolution a month or two ago requesting that the municipality enter into an agreement with the health unit to allow the Inter-Township firefighters to carry naloxone. So we're just here today asking for Council's go ahead to carry naloxone for both the Meaford and District Fire Department and the Inter-Township Fire Department as a community safety issue.
Thank you, Matt. I don't think there's any question about that. Any comments from Council? Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, thank you, and thank you for this report, Matt, and certainly is supporting moving forward. What's curious to me, though, and I'm wondering if we should make mention to our OPP, because in recent OPP reports we've seen 0 drug-related crime listed for the municipality of Meaford. I'm just wondering, through this, can we help to make them more aware of this concern?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think these are sort of two different things. The OPP are very aware of these kinds of issues. When we see zeros for drug-related crime, that probably isn't encompassing calls for overdose issues. The police may or may not be called for an individual overdose, but EMS and fire certainly will be, because it's that immediate medical response. Naloxone certainly won't help us deal with anything that is crime-based, but will help with those immediate life safety situations.
Comments? Yes, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to comment, I think this is a fantastic thing, and I think everybody should have a kit. And if anything happens around here, there is a kit in my truck if you so need it. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay. Now we into updates from members appointed to boards, and I'm just would like Council to bring to our attention anything that is of particular relevance to Council. We can read the minutes and so on, but if there's anything that you want us to understand as it relates to Council from the particular boards or committees that you're on, that would be appreciated at this time. Anything going forward? Councillor Greenfield.
This doesn't really pertain to what you have said, but it does pertain to our municipality.
Mm-hmm.
This is from Great Salva Conservation Authority. Amongst other things, we were advised on Wednesday afternoon that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which for some reason, don't ask me why, is in control of the emerald ash borer pandemic. They have approved a particular type of wasp which will attack the nests of the ash borers and basically kill the larvae. So hopefully, if these wasps prove successful in their mission, we may be able to save some of the ash trees in our area. Thank you for that.
That's good news, as long as there's not any ill effects from that, i.e. the red beetles. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. On the farm safety, the last meeting that we had just this past week, we passed little bylaw that we want to have as a standing thing, an invitation to all members of all the councils in all of Grey County to attend, like what happened last year when Deputy Mayor Keaveney came down and heard a little bit about the farm safety. We are extending that to all of the councils so they can come and see what farm safety is all about.
Date for that, or is there the pending?
That'll be at the year
Stay
end,
tuned.
Madam Mayor.
At the year end. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, seeing nothing further, we'll go on to then the variance report is received for information. Does anyone wish to speak to that? No. So then we'll move on to motion to move out of the committee of the whole. Please, Councillor Bell. Councillor Bell and Councillor Greenfield, sorry. All in favor to move out of committee of the whole? Okay, and motions for decision we have. Are there any notices of motion coming forward? No? Okay. Going on to 10.2, the first motion for decision is non-winter roadway maintenance. Councillor Bell, I'm assuming you'll put that on the table. Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Deputy Mayor? And you wish to speak to that, Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. All fellow members of council have read this, but it's just worthy of orating it. Non-winter roadway maintenance. The recommendation, whereas Council of Municipality Meaford has previously established levels of service for non-winter roadway maintenance through the service delivery review process in July of 2016. And whereas Council has received feedback from members of the public about that level of service, and whereas Council wishes to understand the current level of service and consider possible alternatives, therefore be it resolved, Council of Municipality Meaford directs staff to bring forward a report detailing the current level of service for summer roadway maintenance, and that the report shall include details on the number of instances in which that level of service was not met in 2018.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor of this motion going forward? And those against? And that is carried. Concession A signage. The Deputy Mayor, do you wish to put that on the table?
I do.
And the seconder for that motion? Councillor Greenfield. Okay, Shirley.
Thank you, Your Worship. And the motion reads, whereas Council approved the allocation of $74,409 from the 2016 operating surplus and $332,910 from the 2017 operating surplus towards funding the reconstruction of road and drainage costs on Concession A from Sideroad 18 to Eagle Ridge Drive. Whereas Council has agreed to upgrade Concession A from surface treatment to asphalt with funds from the Small and Rural Municipalities Resources to Improve Service Delivery and Efficiency Grant. Whereas Concession A was pulverized, taken from a paved state to gravel in preparation for construction. Whereas many properties are for sale along the length of Concession A and residents are concerned that any potential purchasers might not realize the extent and or timing of the upcoming construction. Therefore, be it resolved that Council of the Municipality of Meaford directs staff to erect a sign at the intersection of Concession A and Sideroad 18, and that said sign provide motorists with information and timelines regarding the asphalting project on Concession A.
Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To Darcy, seeing we've got direction to do Concession A, do you have a timeline on Concession A?
Through your worship, we don't at this stage of the game because we actually have to reach out to the contractor, and have a pre-construction meeting to determine what their timeline is. There's an expectation built into the tender that the work has to be done by the end of August. So it's generally going to be a 4 to 5 week kind of construction timeline. So, I mean, they're going to start, they're probably going to start as soon as they can. in all reality, but I mean, the latest that they could start most likely is, in and around the very end of July.
If we could get an answer to the question, if they decided, man, we can start in 2 weeks, I don't want to spend money on signage, if they're going to start this in 2 weeks. I'd like to know if they can't start it for 2 months, we should put a sign up, but.
Through your worship, I guess all I can say is that council has to officially approve the award at the next council meeting. Right? That's when this motion would also get approval, right? It gets approval now, yeah. So we wouldn't know until the next meeting, to get approval. Then we have probably a 10 working day period after that to have a pre-construction meeting with the contractor and then try and get contracts signed. So I can't give you a definitive answer at this stage of the game.
Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, just in response to Councillor Bartley's comment, I think the purpose of the sign as well is to let folks know that the road is going to be paved, because even though they're seeing construction, they wouldn't necessarily know that it was going to be, a paved surface. So that's the other side of the reason for the sign.
Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I understand that. Is this a sign that we could use on the next construction or another construction? Just change the face of it? I think it's important.
Typically, through your worship, that's not something that we've done. I mean, they have backing and everything else, and it's just a coroplast sign that, you remove it. The other question that we have is, if we do it ahead of the construction and the contract, then we are the ones who will be responsible for maintaining it, having to go and make sure that it actually stays erect and everything else. Whereas if it's through a contractor and as part of the construction project, then they are the ones who maintain the signs. So the best example would be the Sykes Street Bridge signs. All of those signs that you see littered everywhere, those are the responsibility of the contractor. It's through their traffic control plan. They are the ones that have to make sure that the signs stay erect. If they get damaged or whatever, they have to replace them. If it's our sign, then we're going to have to send staff out there every once in a while to make sure that the sign's doing the job that it's supposed to be doing.
Through your worship, does anybody know what the sign will cost?
No.
Approximately?
Through your worship, I would say it could probably be done for less than $1,000 all in. But I mean, the sign, the quote that we got for sign prices for the Sykes Street was $1,000 each. I would assume that, you're going to want, it's a coroplast on a wood backing. It's just not coroplast. It has to have a frame built around it and everything else. Probably, $1,000.
Okay, that answers your question. Councillor Bell? No? I actually think the signage on our construction projects is a really good idea. If we can work it through the construction company so that it advertises your tax dollars at work, and I think there's nothing wrong with that in terms of sending that message out to the general public with a completion date if it is possible, because that's important for folks to know as well.
Through your worship, so the signs that we actually plastered on the bridge, like Sykes Street Bridge, right on the bridge, they were between $400 and $500 each for the sign, and then our own staff actually just bolted them on. So you're going to have a similar size sign, so the sign's still going to be $400 or $500. There's nothing to bolt it on. We can't just nail it to a tree, so you're actually going to have to build some kind of a stand for it and everything else to put it on. So I'm probably, a couple $100 here or there. I'm not far off. It's probably not going to. It won't cost more than $1,000.
Matt?
And just to make sure everybody understands, through your worship, if we ask the construction company to do this, this sign will go up when construction starts, because they won't come out here and put a sign up and check it on a daily basis when they're not going to be here for a month or so.
Any other questions? Good. Deputy Mayor.
I would just add, your worship, if I may, I think, as Darcy suggested, staff would need to drive out to check on the sign. Perhaps they're checking on the construction anyway, but I'm pretty sure the residents out there would let us know if there was any vandalism or damage to the sign.
Okay, we will call the question. All in favor of this motion going forward? 2, 3, 4. That is carried. And moving on then to the last one, Memorial Park Master Plan Comment Period Deadline Extension. Councillor Greenfield, you requested that. We put that on the table. Can I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Kentner? Okay. Do you want to speak to it?
Fairly straightforward. Whereas in this county, Meaford Council.
Sorry, Councillor Greenfield, could you use your microphone? Thank you.
Long-term master plan is necessary for future activities in Memorial Park, and whereas the municipality has appointed a reputable consultant to develop a proposed Memorial Park master plan, and whereas several members of the public and various other stakeholders have requested more time to comment upon the master plan proposal. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford extends the Memorial Park Master Plan public commenting period to September 6, 2019. And if I may,
please, yeah.
Thank you. I'll start off by saying that date can be changed by a friendly amendment, if anyone chooses to. We've all heard the concerns that a lot of our stakeholders have expressed about wishing to have more time for commenting. I think perhaps one of the problems has been that up until about 3 or 4 days ago, it was still almost winter weather, and it was a deterrent to go down to the park. You certainly didn't want to go near the beach because the water was icy cold, and still is. But it was just not park-type weather, and a number of people just weren't in the mood to explore Memorial Park or comment on Memorial Park. So I think that's one reason why comments have been slow coming through. Memorial Park has, for all effects and purposes, been there for 60 years, and it's done very well. We're talking about a master plan that could forecast the future up to 25 years. You put those together, that's 85 years. I don't think another 3 months for comments is asking too much. We had a situation earlier this evening, some of you weren't here at that time, but we deferred the reconstruction of a road in our municipality until we got more information. I think this is something similar. We want to do this right when we do it, so let's give it the extra commenting time. Let's do it right. Let's do it right for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bell?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would make an amendment to Councillor Greenfield's date of September the 6th, and I think if I heard correctly, the 26th. 23rd. Thank you very much. The 23rd is what I heard, and I would move that would be added to the end of Councillor Greenfield's motion.
It's an amendment to seconder for that. Okay. Councillor Bartley? Oh, we've already had a seconder. I thought you had another question, a comment. You're thirding it. Okay. All right. So are there any further comments on the amendment to the 23rd? Call the question on that, and that carries. And so comments on the amended motion to extend the consultation period. All in favor of that motion as presented, and that is carried. Council meeting of, move into the adoption of the minutes. Council meeting of May 13th, 2019. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Any comments, questions on the agenda minutes? All in favor? And that is carried. Special meeting, strategic priority session minutes, notes, May 6th. Can move in a seconder for that, please? Okay. Deputy Mayor Ann Ross Kentner, thank you. Comments on that, all in favor? Those notes, and that is carried. Anything from the communications list that anyone wants to bring forward? Is anything? Now, Ross, are you still looking?
I know I'm lost on our agenda, but I just wanted to make a correction to the minutes of the Heritage Committee. So if we're not there yet, just wake me up when we get there.
I don't believe we don't have the Heritage Committee minutes.
Well, I thought there was a spot on the adoption of minutes for updates from members of, appointed to different committees.
We'll see those minutes at the next meeting.
Yeah, those minutes will be approved by the next meeting of the Heritage Committee, so we can make those amendments then, or I can make those amendments in advance.
Okay, not here. All right, so then we need a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw, if you will, please. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bell. All in favor? Thank you very much. And that completes the business at hand. 7:05. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I declare the meeting adjourned. Five hours. Well, a little better, is it? Bye, Paul.